We are on live and starting the recording.
Good evening, everyone. I, Sukanya Mitra, welcome all of you to this webinar series. I'm an assistant professor in history, Loreto College, Kolkata. Today is the first day of the second webinar series on resilient and sustainable development of historic precincts and areas, Focus West Bengal, organized by ICOMOS India, East Zone, and National Scientific Committee of Historic Towns and Villages, supported by Emerging Professionals Working Group, EPWG. Before we begin, I would request all those who are attending today's webinar to please keep your audios and videos switched off. Please use the chat box to type in your questions and comments, and we will take them at the end of the session. Those watching the event live on Facebook can use the comments box for your questions, comments. In case of any difficulty, please raise your hand in the Zoom platform and our team will respond accordingly. To begin with, let me say a few words about the International Council on Monuments and Sites, that is ICOMOS. ICOMOS, the advisory body to the UNESCO World Heritage Committee, is one of the largest global non-governmental organizations with members from diverse fields of architecture, town planning, history, archaeology, ethnology, archives, law, ecology, arts, crafts, economics, sociology, anthropology, and many more. At present, there are around 440 World Heritage Sites of mixed natural and cultural categories. ICOMOS endeavors to conserve, promote, enhance, and protect cultural heritage sites. ICOMOS India is the national committee of ICOMOS International, and its members work towards the conservation of cultural heritage. In 2017, the International Assembly of ICOMOS was held in Delhi, which emphasized the role of the people, community, and democracy in conservation. The inaugural series of webinars on resilient and sustainable development of historic precincts and areas, Focus West Bengal, took place on 27th and 28th August 2020, in which a number of eminent speakers and discussants illuminated the concepts, frameworks, needs, and experiences of historic precincts and areas. The theme for the second webinar series, taking place over 2 days, that is today and on 3rd October 2020, is Heritage Economics, Legal Tools, and Management Mechanisms for Historical Precincts and Areas. There are divergent and parallel initiatives related to heritage resources in the state of West Bengal, India, such as the declaration of Cooch Behar and Nabadvip as heritage towns, review of state-level acts by the state government, several initiatives taken by different public bodies, NGOs, etc. At the same time, we witness continuous demolitions of buildings due to lack of maintenance and other pecuniary conditions, which change the entire character of areas and precincts, which could otherwise have been put to better use. What are the legal challenges of heritage conservation? Are the same laws, bylaws applicable to all places, particularly in a diverse country such as India? How do we come up with a rational approach towards grading of heritage areas and precincts, which is in any case a dynamic concept and needs to evolve with time? What methods can be adopted to make heritage conservation economically lucrative for the owners and other stakeholders so that they understand that conservation and development are not contradictory but complementary concepts? These are just a few of several questions which this webinar series hopes to address. At this point, let me share some observations based on my personal experiences. My house, located in the northern parts of Calcutta, is 100 years old, and I have been trying to think of ways to make it economically viable. Towards this end, I have approached several people to use it as a cultural space. However, most of them visited my house, told me that although it was a beautiful house, the location in the north of the city and inside a lane would not be conducive for people to attend cultural events. Another problem would be lack of parking facilities. I'm not aware of owners of other old houses in the vicinity having faced such issues, since frankly, I have not had the opportunity to talk to them. However, a resident of another old house in my locality told me that he had tried to hold classical music soirees in his courtyard to raise money for maintenance of the building, but found very little response from the people in the neighborhood. Maybe if the area is declared as a heritage precinct, it will become a much sought after locality. I believe that each city, town, village has its own strengths as well as drawbacks, and any heritage management mechanism that we adopt needs to be devised accordingly. With these introductory comments and thoughts, I will now introduce the speakers for the first session. It is my privilege to introduce Dr. Nikhil Joshi for the keynote address. Nikhil Joshi is a senior lecturer in the Department of Architecture at the National University of Singapore. Educated at the University of Pune and the University of York and National University of Singapore, his research interests include cultural heritage management, traditional building materials and techniques, and community participatory approaches. He is a fellow of the Royal Geographical Society UK and recipient of the Society for the Protection of Ancient Buildings Lethaby Scholarship UK. He has been an active speaker in various conferences throughout the world and has several publications to his name. His recent publications include Mahabodhi Temple at Bodh Gaya, Constructing Sacred Placeness, Deconstructing the Great Case of 1895, published in 2019, and Community Voices, Preserving the Local Heritage, published in 2016, besides several edited volumes. His presentation is titled Managing Change in Historical Southeast Asian Cities, Investing in Heritage and People. Over to Dr. Joshi.
Dr. Joshi, you're muted.
Sorry. Yeah. So namaskar everyone, and good evening from Singapore. Sukanya ji, thank you very much for the introduction, and thank you ICOMOS India, the East Zone, for inviting me for this very relevant and timely talk. In fact, today is first, and tomorrow I will be discussing a similar kind of thing with the Prime Minister. He's initiating Prime Minister Modi is initiating a similar initiative for a Gandhi Jayanti. So tomorrow we have a chat with him as well on a similar, because I feel it is quite important. The history and heritage of India can be a very important aspect for the economy in the future, in the recent future. So what we have to do is we have to manage it, and that's very important. And what I'm going to talk today is going to give some examples of some case studies from this part of the world, which is Southeast Asian countries, and talk about how people have invested in heritage and the local communities, at the local people. So I'll start. That's why I call this Investing in Heritage and People, Managing Change in Historic Southeast Asian Cities. Right. Okay, so this is a very recent. I don't know how many of you have actually seen this document. This was very recently in New York when the UN General Assembly held on 18th of September. There was a small session on the SDGs, which is the Sustainable Development Goals, which has been going around for some time now. People, when we talk about economy and heritage and all, everyone talks about SDGs, which is Sustainable Development Goals, and every country is trying to achieve those 17 SDGs. So this was part of the. So this is just a screenshot of what was told there that how culture is so important for world economy, and even more important now with the COVID thing, and when the economies are not doing good. So how can culture be a very important part of the economy, the world economy? And as you can see, I'm not going to read everything. It's just that the culture and creative industries contribute US dollars 2,250 billion, which is almost 3% of the GDP of the world. So, and it gives 29.5 million jobs worldwide. And as we know that the economies are shrinking and the jobs have been lost, people have been retrenched. So how culture can be a very important tool to revive this economy in the future. It's very important, and unfortunately, India is rich with all these historic places and intangible heritage. So this was discussed just 2 weeks ago on 18th on this. Right. This is another one which I was talking about, the 17 SDGs, a Sustainable Development Goal. So you can see that all of them are directly or indirectly linked with culture. Again, I'm going to read number 8, which I think it's quite important when we talk about urban renewals and heritage conservation, built heritage conservation. Number 8 says the culture and creative industries offer job opportunities adapted to local realities and needs. Yes, we all know that. And it's quite important. Like I said, with the current situation, it's very, very important that how do we treat our heritage is going to help us with whether we revive our economy faster or it will be a slower revival. Number 9 talks about cultural infrastructure and creative professionals drive innovation and diversify economies. That's also quite important, the word diversification. What we generally see in the developing Southeast Asian countries, and I can say this for Asian countries as well, the other South Asian countries, is we don't try to diversify. And this is where I go next, is we see heritage as equals to tourism, and that's very dangerous. In a way, what we have seen in the last 6 or 7 months is if we just rely on tourism, and if something like this happens, a pandemic where people are not allowed to travel, it's a complete disaster for cities, for towns, for countries which rely on just tourism. So we have to diversify. We have to think beyond just tourism. We don't have to say heritage equals tourism, which in most cases this is the case. So that's quite important, and these are some of the newspaper articles which I collected when I was working on my research. This was almost 10 years ago. You can see the dates, 2011, 2006, but the situation is still the same. $1 billion opportunity, how heritage can become a serious economic driver for India and all. And like we have seen for last 6-7 months, people are not traveling. I have no idea. I can tell you that Singapore is suffering a lot because we also rely a lot on foreign visitors. So in my talk today, I'll be taking you around Southeast Asia, sitting wherever you are sitting. I mean, this is the fun part of technology. I'll take you around 4 different cities and in 3 different countries. I will take you to Philippines, which is this is Vegan in Philippines, which is a World Heritage Site. Then I will take you to Malaysia. I'll talk very briefly about Malacca, which is also a World Heritage Site, a UNESCO World Heritage Site. Then its sister city, which is Georgetown in Penang. And at last, I will come to Singapore, which is not a World Heritage City, but yes. So I will talk in these 4 different countries, then how they are dealing with their heritage and mainly built heritage, and in these 4 different cities, which has got the 3 different countries having different economic backgrounds, and the sizes, the population is quite different. So how they are dealing with this their heritage management. So this is Vegan. This is the central part of the Vegan, the core part. As you can see, the middle part, which is light brown, is the core area, and the red one, the shaded one, is basically the buffer zone. just to tell people who have never been to Vigan, Vigan is a very small historic Spanish colonial town, quite intact still. The plus point is it's tourism actually started quite late, and so the buildings are still there. It's quite intact, to be very honest, the building wise. And if you go east to west, you can actually walk by foot in 20 minutes. So that's the area wise. So you can imagine it's not a very big area I'm talking about, because there's no scale here. So just to tell you that from east to west, you can actually walk on a leisurely way in 20 minutes. From north to south along the river, maybe 10-15 minutes. So it's not a very big part, a very big space. So that's Vigan, and this is how it looks like. Like I said, it's a Spanish colonial town with cobbled streets and different types of different typologies of buildings. Some are timber, some are brick, but mostly brick and lime mortar and lime plaster. So you can see it looks quite neat and clean and quite well preserved. But to me, it's overly done, and it is mostly for the tourism's sake. It relies very heavily on tourism, foreign tourists and the local tourists as well. So these three pictures again, more or less telling the story. The buildings are used for Instagram, Facebook pictures, a lot of young visitors, and yes, some of the buildings are used for the typical souvenirs, for souvenirs and other things. But the top right hand corner is a picture which they started a public park which never finished. And as you can see, some of the local rickshaw guys are just sitting. It can be quite hot there, hot and humid, and yes, they are just resting in the afternoon and near the gate. So the park, as you can see, it's no grass there, and it's quite unfinished. So what I'm going to what my point here is a lot of emphasis is on the tourism and the foreign tourists, which comes with money, but the locals are kind of not the primary focus. They are secondary citizens basically in their own city. What's happening? So this is the biggest church, St. Paul's Cathedral there, beautiful cathedral with a bell tower, freestanding bell tower, as you can see, the white one. But the other building at the end is again a building which is overly restored. I don't know the materials. I'm pretty sure that they haven't used the right material there, but I cannot guarantee that. But then that's a McDonald's. I don't know whether you can see that in the tower there's an M and McDonald's written at the entrance, and it's surrounded by all these food chains and 7-Elevens and things like that. And this is the main square. All the other important government buildings, including the mayor office, is surrounding these square. So this is the most important square, yeah. So it's all surrounded by all these shops and food chains, and that's so again the emphasis on tourism and how to attract the building usage. Basically, the compatibility of the original use and all is again a secondary purposes. This is the condition, and I've seen all these buildings which in these pictures you are seeing are mostly ancestral houses. So the core area consists of, like I said, either the town hall or some of the religious structures like this St. Paul's, the Bante Church, which is beautiful, very still in use, very much in use by the locals on Sunday for the mass. But most of these buildings which are in the core area are either converted, like you see, either converted in the process of converting into hotels, the typical boutique hotels, or they are left disused. Is because these are ancestral houses, and so a lot of joint owners, and they are all in Manila or other places, so they are not actually living there. So what they do is they have two options: either they can rent it for the souvenir shops, and when the people rent it, they don't take care of the building. They are just interested in the space and sell their souvenirs, or they will sell it to a developer who will do whatever they want to do with the building and try to maximize the space and convert it into a hotel. So what's happening there is we have the maximum buildings are converted into hotels. or cafes, which we see everywhere else. I mean, I'm going to give you other examples. But the mayor is I was quite interested and quite happy to meet the mayor and spend 3 days with him. He's a young mayor. His parents were also former mayors, and he's under 40 and quite passionate. He's a local. He's quite passionate about the. So he was like, so I said, what are you doing? You know, how can you stop all these things? So he was like, see, most of the buildings are belong to private owners, so I can't do much. What he has done is if you remember the first slide also, if you can read this, I'm not sure whether you can read it, but the picture, it says this property has been acquired by the city government of Vegan through negotiated sale of property under expropriation proceedings. So he said that, you know, if we see that the building is quite the developer has bought it, and then they are doing something which is going to not enhance the OUV, outstanding universal value of our place. We tend to advise them. If they don't listen, then we use our powers, discretionary powers, and then we buy the property. But he's unaware. When I ask him, what's your plan for this building, which has been lying disused, the big building which they acquired on the right, they have no idea what they are going to use it. But at least they stopped this huge, ugly, humongous construction happening at the end of the core, at the start of the buffer zone. So they said they were unhappy with it, but the developer didn't listen to them, so they had to do this. So what's happening here is most of these ancestral Spanish colonial houses are bought over, like I said earlier, by developers, and they are converting them into hotels. So he said that they are still thinking of a right way of using these buildings. But what I was impressed by his idea of investing in people. He said, I mean, it's a small city. They are not very rich. So they said, we don't have that sort of money that we buy all these buildings and use it for public uses. But what he's doing is he's trying to educate the youngsters, because what we see in the developing nations is basically when the young people leave the cities, leave their own hometowns, their historic hometowns, they have no chance of getting back the significance, the historical significance and the culture. It's completely lost because the people who come from outside have no attachment to the place and to the buildings. So what he's trying is he is funding a lot of they have started a center there to train these youngsters in different activities, including hospitality management, which is quite relevant because of it's vegan, it's touristic town, and also butchery, baking, carpentry, and other things. And he said that his main purpose of this training the youngsters is so that they can actually stay in the city, stay in vegan, and start their own work and employ other people instead of just going overseas or other cities like Manila and do work there. So he said that while they are thinking of how to make use of these beautiful buildings and not just cafes so they're investing in their own people and trying to get them stay in the city, start their businesses, and even employ the other people. So I think that was a good approach because they don't have enough money to buy the buildings and get it used by the local people. Coming to Malacca, I have to be quick because it's already 15 minutes. Malacca, okay, I forgot to mention, Vegan became a World Heritage Site in 1999. Malacca became in 2008. So Georgetown and Malacca together in 2008. So this is Malacca. This is another the historic square of Malacca. Dutch and Portuguese influence, British influence as well. A lot of shop houses, and it's a Straits of Malacca. So it's basically a port city with a lot of these Dutch, Portuguese, Britishers doing trades. And as you can see, this is the most important street. It's called Jonker Street. It's right at the core area of World Heritage across the river. And most of the buildings here which were earlier used by the locals, are converted into same typical shops, as you can see. Even the shops serving the tourist, the visitors, local visitors or the foreign visitors. It's quite near to Singapore. A lot of people have bought actually property there, Singaporeans, because it's a good price, and you can make money, because as you can see on Friday, Saturday, and Sundays, it's you can hardly walk on Jonker Walk. It's full of tourists, and the property prices have gone up, the rentals have gone up, the even the food prices and coffee and everything. So the locals have actually moved out completely, and because they are saying that we don't actually can even recognize that this is own Malacca, where I was born and brought up, and I used to play with my friends, and everything has become so expensive. We can't really afford so the rental, even chicken rice or something like that. So these people have moved out. Unfortunately, the state government, or even the last time I went there, we have a research center in Malacca, and US our department. So I used to go there quite often, and I haven't seen. I mean, it's going worse rather than and so all these people coming and actually using. So it's very. I have no idea how's the situation now with the COVID, when all these foreign tourists are not going and spending money there, how the people are actually surviving, because the rentals are quite high. Another problem facing there is when you think that you can have as many tourists as possible, then this was a project planned few years ago, which was a Malacca Gateway. And as you can see, they wanted to have man-made islands and have all high rises and ferry center and many other things. So they wanted to have, and all this what you are seeing in the bottom picture on the island is all artificial. Man-made islands, and they wanted to have 5-star hotels and things like that. If you can see on the top, the yellow Portuguese written, per Kampungan Portuguese, which means Portuguese settlement or Portuguese village. So these are the Portuguese people who came from Portugal, of course, 500 years ago, and they settled down there. This is right at their doorstep what was planned. And these people, because of this reclamation of sea, they had all their fishing and crab and all that business have died in the last 5-6 years. And what you can see is all around you is all these skyscrapers. This is a 3 years old photograph. So what you can see is all these are already finished, and these are hotels now, Hilton and whatnot. So it's all serving the foreigners who can afford these crazy prices there. And the Portuguese who have been living there for 500 years. Now, I call them Portuguese, but they're not Portuguese, they're Malaysians now. But yes, for 500 years, they've been treated. And this place is walking distance from the core area, and hardly any tourists will go here because this is not in the map. Very few, maybe 1 or 2% of people will go and visit this area. It was a beautiful area, fishing, a lot of food, like fishes, a crab, and that sort of freshly cooked you can order. But now slowly it's all dying. As you can see, it's the silting of the sea, and they can't hardly take boats out, because for as long as they can see is all silt. Okay, coming to the sister city. So this is what happens when you only focus on tourism and you become greedy actually. So it's all about money, how we can extract more and more money from the tourist, and not think about the locals and their businesses. So fortunately, there's this sister city, which is Georgetown, and this is again in Malaysia. They started. They were on a different track. I mean, like India, they were ruled by 2 different state governments. So the Malacca, the state government was the same one which was ruling the federal, the center. This one was ruled by another one for long time, and so this was a non-central government which was ruling here. So that was the politics of heritage going. So this was I felt was more people centric here. So they started this the shop houses which were rented by long-term tenants. what happened is after the 2008 World Heritage Site designation, the rents have gone up, and the local businesses which were paying only like $300, $500, the prices go up crazily, 10 times, 50 times like that. And also what happened is in 1999 there was a rent control for long time, a Rent Control Act, and then that was repealed. So the owners can increase the rent, and also the traditional business people who were working here, like the barbers or the cycle owners or the Ratan weaver, they were all have to move out. But what interesting thing happened is in 2011, there was a organization called Think City, which was it's kind of an NGO, federal funded organization. So they had some funding from the central government, and they joined hands with the organization called ACHR, which is Asian Coalition of Housing Rights, based in Bangkok. And ACHR was very keen on doing something for the tenants and how they can actually stay even though the rentals are high. So there was a lot of consultation happened, and a lot of discussions happened to what is the best way of actually finding a system where the owners and the people can, and the tenants can work together, and so that they can actually stay and work. The traditional businesses can still survive in this historic World Heritage site, where, as I've explained earlier, the rentals will go high very soon. So as you can see, so the 10 shop houses were selected, and they belong to a local Chinese clan association. And as you can see, the 8 of them were rented, and then 2 were part of the temple itself. So this was the thing which they came with. So ACHR, which is the Asian Coalition of Housing Rights, Thailand-based, Bangkok-based organization, which was very interested in affordable housing in urban cities, and they work all over Asia. They joined hands with Think City, which has grant from, and then they said, okay, we give you a grant to the owners, the property owners, but then for physical upgrading of the buildings. But what they have to come up with is they have to sign an agreement that they will keep the tenant, the long-term tenant, for another 10 years, let's say, and they won't increase the rental, because these property owners also are not very rich. So as many of you will know, renovation work or the repair conservation is not an easy task for these historic buildings. It costs a lot of money, and then when you do the all these repairs and everything, then you want the rental will automatically go higher. So how do we help these property owners through this grant, which is not a very huge grant actually, but then so that the owners can get and then the owners and tenants can work a way. And as you can see, it started the tenant side 2010, and it's a long process, because it requires it's a lot of stakeholders here. Think City, ACHR, they have to build up a trust with the property owners and with the tenants, and then and the tenants and owners have to build up a trust. So it's not an exercise which can be done in one meeting or something. It goes for years, and I think in this initiative, it went for 3 to 4 years, and ultimately they were able to repair some of the houses, and the tenants get a long-term 10 years of rental agreement, so that they can stay for longer term. But then after a few years, 3 or 4 years, few houses done, and then it kind of fizzled out. It started again. Another thing. I mean, this gives you an idea of how many premises there. There are around 4,443 in the core area, which are. So what happened is after in 2017, 2018, there was a survey done, and it was found out that the rentals are still quite high. So the government decided that there might be a possibility that the Rent Control Act, a very selective one, will come back. And how do they? So they did a survey. Survey is very important. That's our first step. They did a survey and found out that Kongsi, which is the clan associations, have around 12%, 530 properties. Then the local and the private individuals have got almost 75%, 3342. And these are the ones which, for higher rental, they will give it to cafe, boutique, hotels, art galleries. And this was happening in Georgetown for the last many years. And it's kind of still happening. So this survey was done, and it was found out that, this is the pattern, how many people and what we can do. So this was decided that based on their earlier sort of experience of ACHR and Think City and doing that grant thing, in 2 years after doing the survey and all, in 2018, they came up with this idea of Heritage Habitat Seed Fund. And again, will be a public contribution, which is a matching fund. So government will fund, and this time it was a straight run organization called GTWHI, which is Georgetown World Heritage Incorporated, which initiated this. And I was talking to the person who worked on this, and we had a good discussion. So she said that, Nikhil, it is still not very much a success. It's still at a very initial stages, and we are still learning, because it's a long process. Like I said, working with so many stakeholders, working with so many different organizations takes a lot of time and trust. Trust building is the most important thing. Money wise, yes, you can give the money straight away, but how to select, who to give money, because its money is limited as well. So the funding is limited. So this time it was a matching fund thing. So the owners will contribute, and then they will get a matching fund from GTWHI. And then what will happen through this Habitat Seed Fund, they can restore the premises, and they can also work with for the long-term tenancy as well. So the same thing. Earlier it was more sort of a grant, and this time they have, from their previous experience, they have even said to me that the good thing is they're trying to cut the red tape. So how they are trying to cut the red tape is basically they are actually not giving money to the owner. They are giving money directly to the contractor. So the contractor will be paid directly to them. So there is no chance of corruption or bribery or whatever. So yes, so it's part of the learning process for them as well. Although it is on paper, it is almost like 9 or 10 years. But yes, so this way they can actually repair the buildings as well, and also make sure that the traditional businesses and the traditional residents, the long-term residents, can actually stay in that precinct, in the heritage zone. And because, as we know, that they are very important for the OUVs, what we call as OUVs of the site, because mostly what we see is we are only concentrated on buildings done, the peoples have moved out, and because the rentals are quite high. So I'm going to show you a very quick, if I can play this.
As an artist, I am drawn to the humble origins of the early migrant settlements and the buildings of the older parts of the city. One of my art projects, done between 1980 and 1995, was a collection of 64 watercolors, showing the design and the evolution of the shophouse facades, built from 1900 to 1960 in Malacca, Penang, Singapore, and Kuala Lumpur. This film is about Malacca and Singapore. But both the conservation areas of Singapore and Malacca has one thing in common. It is the death of the traditional and historical community life. And the beginning of the so-called progressive, cleaner, synthetic international lifestyle, including the increase of noise, air, and environmental pollution.
Dr. Joshi,
Yeah.
Crowding of
maybe we could, I have already copied the link to the chat box.
Yes.
So I think those who are interested can, watch the video, because I think the time is,
Yes.
is measured not by how well they look after the rich.
Right. So it's a 17 minutes video. You can watch it at your leisure. It's a friend, Victor Chin, who made it, and I find it very compelling. Okay, I come to the last city, which is Singapore. Singapore is a young state, population of around 5.6 million, and area is around 522 square kilometers, something like that. So we got independence in full independence in 1965. So it's comparatively quite a young, small state. And since then, the government started thinking about the rehabilitation of state-owned shop houses. When I say URA, it's the Urban Redevelopment Authority, which is the authority which takes care of the land. If I have to give an example, I would say Delhi Development Authority in Delhi, DDA, which take care of the building plans and everything else. So as we were part of the port cities, Straits of Malacca. So it was Malacca, then Georgetown, and then the port came to Singapore with Britishers. And so we have the similar kind of typology, building typology, shop houses, but mostly British times shop houses. As you can see in the background, these are the traditional shop houses in Chinatown area, which is a historic precinct, precinct. And I'll just read quickly. The M&D minister said in early 70s that we need to maintain a certain character for Singapore. If you knock down all old buildings, what will come in its place is very modern buildings, so no different from modern buildings in New York or Hong Kong or Shanghai. So they were talking about the identity of a place. Then they were doing this. So they understood that heritage is very important part they made some wrong decisions, and they are open to that, and they say that yes, in 80s when they were thinking of development, they demolished some of the old shop houses and other buildings, but then they very quickly realized that they have to keep it, otherwise it will become another Hong Kong, Shanghai, or New York. So this is so what initially what they started in 70s, 80s is actually they set up an example. So they bought a row of shop houses, and then they restored them. I'm not going to comment on the restoration, whether good or bad or whatever. But yes, so to set an example, like a pilot study, like what was done in Georgetown, it's very, very good to show people that this can be done. And it is both economic wise, rental wise. So how to make sure that people understand that it's not expensive, and we can still keep the building and earn good money. So this was a project done in 1985. It's a row of shop houses. Again, a conserved.
Joshi, sorry to interrupt you, but now I think we'll have to conclude. Yes.
Yeah. So I'll just take another 3 minutes.
Okay.
Yeah. So in conservation areas, we have different types of conservation areas, and there was historic districts, and divided into historic districts, residential districts, and also the secondary settlements. They have different types of bylaws. So whether you can build something new or whether you can't build something new. So those are actually, so it's not like a blanket. So depending on the significance of the area, so they are categorized, and we have around 100 conservation areas and over 7,200 conserved buildings in Singapore. As you can see, they sit side by side to the new development as well. Property prices are very high, especially for the main district. So again, economy comes into play, finances come into play, and so we have to make sure that if somebody is paying 32 million for Sing dollars for 2 shop houses, then they can't have a traditional business there. So how do we do it? Most of these buildings are privately owned. As you can see, conservation sits next to the new and old. Private buildings are not owned by government, so developers can do whatever they want to do. I'll just show you some examples, and I will leave it to you to decide whether it is good or bad conservation. This is like iconic building from 74, which has recently been demolished, and on the left-hand side one is the new building coming up, which was just last year. It was a lot of just very quickly, this is my almost last slide, these are some of the tools. These are not my tools, but I find it very, very important. This was developed by an MIT professor in 1997, published in the book, Preserving the Built Heritage Tools for Implementation. And they talk about ownership and operation. So one of the tool is you acquire the building like Singapore did or other places, and then you operate it. It's a very expensive thing. You cannot buy and operate all the buildings. It's very difficult. In vegan case, we have seen. In Singapore case, we have seen. Regulations, yes, regulations are quite good. But then all these conservation people have limited implementation and enforcement people. So and then these regulations cannot only work with just the sticks. So you have to give some carrots of incentives as well. Education, advocacy, I have already explained. Property rights and incentives are very, very important. One of them is, I'm not going to explain this, no time left. Transfer development rights, TDR, which you can go and Google it. It's quite important. Hong Kong is using it very, very nicely for selective conservation because same like Singapore, the property prices are very, very high. So here you transfer the development rights. So the conserved building is kept like that, and the transfer rights gone to the other side. So it's a win-win situation for heritage and development. And that's it. So this is another video which I just wanted to show later. I mean, there's a link there. You can watch it later. This is a building which is owned by our Department of Architecture. I've been working here, and this is a conserved building. And how do we use it for different purposes, for teaching, for training, and for experimentation? Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Joshi. I have been given the unpopular task of, cutting short.
No. That's
presentations.
a task.
Sorry about that.
No, perfect.
Yeah, I will share the link of Dr. Joshi's second video also with all of you. But right now we are going to move on to the second case study. The first case study, I'm sorry. We just finished the keynote. The first case study is on the city of Ahmedabad. It is to be presented by Mr. Ashish Trambadia. Mr. Ashish Trambadia is currently heading the Ahmedabad World Heritage City Trust, which works mainly for urban conservation in the historic walled city, its building sites and living heritage. Established by Ahmedabad Municipal Corporation, the trust has started several initiatives of community involvement and capacity building, along with restoration of locally listed structures. The trust has also involved various institutions for preparing heritage conservation plan and other heritage-focused projects for larger awareness, active participation, and heritage-inclusive urban planning as well as design. Time to time, consultative meetings, capacity building workshops and programs, youth involvement, etc. are done by the trust. Mr. Trambadia has worked as conservation architect with various national and international organizations and private owners for historic building conservation. His presentation today is titled Heritage Management Mechanism for Private Houses in Ahmedabad World Heritage City. Over to Mr. Trambadia.
Thank you, Sukanya, and it was an excellent presentation by Professor Joshi. So let me quickly jump to the presentation today. I hope it is visible.
Yes. Yes, it is.
So Ahmedabad is, I mean, in my eyes, it's the place of holistic heritage. I mean, it's quite different from what Professor Joshi explained in his keynote, where it's not about tourism, it's more about a living city and the quality of life that is there in the walled city. So still after the recognition in the World Heritage Inscription in 2017, in these 3 years, what I've seen is conservation and restoration based initiatives focused on people and their lifestyle rather than tourism. So aesthetic conservation is not really the main idea or focus here. It's more about the quality of life aspects inside it. So in explaining the tools and mechanisms that we are experimenting at Ahmedabad Municipal Corporation, in the journey, I would like to start from the tail, some of the tails. I have timed my presentation also, so to be within the limit. But this is very interesting. One case in 17th century, one of the citizen from the city was a successful businessman and was a very important businessman working with the Mughal court in Delhi. In 17th century, one of the decisions made by the Subedar of Gujarat under the Sultanate of Delhi, that decision was changed by the persuasion of our own Shantidas Zaveri, who was a businessman. So understand that there was an administration and the people's persuasion. So there was this persuasion done by Shantidas Zaveri. There are interesting research done by various historians on this matter. I would not really like to describe the entire event, but a common businessman was able to change the decision made by the Subedar, who was the son of the Sultan himself in his time. So that was the kind of power the people has. Same person's son, Khushal Das Zaveri, from the same business community, in the 18th century, he was the one who actually, during the siege from Maratha, from the south, towards north to Ahmedabad, while they had a siege already on Surat, they were coming towards Ahmedabad. Khushal Das Zaveri was one businessman who stopped them in between, outside the walled city, and negotiated with them. So this negotiation led to avoidance of war situation. That was the persuasion possible by the business and mercantile community of Ahmedabad. And third generation of the same family, Nagar Sheth Wakhatchand, also was a very strong person who actually had a treaty with General Godard and could have actually favored the situation, which would otherwise be critical administratively. So, I mean, in generally, we research a lot on fortifications, and this is one scenario where the war and conflict situation was completely avoided by simply talking and persuasion. It may be monetary negotiation, but it has avoided a lot of conflicts. So this was the power the people of Ahmedabad has shown in the past. Now coming back to the city itself, which is the inscribed property, established on the eastern bank of river Sabarmati, and this is the kind of topography for others to understand. It has got very rich agricultural lands all around the rivers, and there is this urban sprawl which is growing further. So the light gray boundaries is what is the master plan of Ahmedabad, which includes a lot of village areas right now. But the dark gray and the darkest black, that's the area where the urban sprawl today is, and the darkest, the black color inside is the core walled city. In terms of development, in 1411, Ahmed Shah started a fortified city here, and that's where it probably, you can say, it get its limelight, because that was the first time the capital of Gujarat was shifted from Patan to Ahmedabad. And that's how it was named also after Ahmed Shah as Ahmedabad. Then followed by rule by Mughals, by Marathas and Britishers. All these regimes had produced magnificent monuments. But I'll also come back to the values, OUVs that has made this inscription possible. As I said earlier, it's not really about royal buildings or the royalties or the administrators, rulers. It's more about people. So there are two distinct characters of Ahmedabadi architecture, which is part of the OUVs of the World Heritage Property, and that is both in terms of architectural evolution, which happened, and probably I strongly believe many architects do, that contributed to Mughal architecture development of India. Because Akbar learned from Ahmedabad and then implemented in Fatehpur Sikri or Agra and Delhi, so on. Same was with Shah Jahan and Aurangzeb. So Ahmedabad has a very important key role in giving birth to this new architecture, which is Hindu-Muslim architecture, as we say, for Ahmedabad. So that exchange happened here. In terms of urban chronology, I've already explained, but you can all understand how in phases the city has grown. Almost 80 times of the walled city is what the present urban municipal limits today is. Out of about 66 lakhs, the old city has 4.79 lakhs population inside the old city, which is quite dense comparing to the other urban sprawl of the city. And that density itself is a challenge. In terms of art and architecture, as I said, it was done under many different administration and rules, but everybody has carried forward. Very interestingly, 1411, when the Bhadra fort, or the first part of the fortification, was built by Ahmed Shah, it was inspired from Patan's architecture. The Patan was a Solanki or Chalukyan kingdom. And whatever was there was transformed into an Islamic city planning form in Ahmedabad. So which is a very interesting exchange of cultural values in architecture. So there was a Islamic patronage. There were local craftsmen who were engaged, and there was birth of this new architecture which started evolving that included more of civil and religious buildings. There are water structures like the Kankaria Lake, the stepwells, and the large circuit tank. There are city gates. There are other gardens, and very few of the palaces. I mean, most of the palaces do not survive today, but there are few of the palaces also. So there is a very less presence of royal architecture, but more of civic and public architecture in Ahmedabad. So that's the legacy that we have. As I said, it's more about the city of people rather than the rulers. And also the art forms. So the Matani Pachedi art forms, which is much more popular here, and it's renowned for its speciality in this region, mainly the religious painting. But on the second side, on the other side, we have this new small timber architecture pattern, and which is very small and micro in terms of scales. So you can see the exquisite carving that is seen on the timber, but the house sizes are not more than 100 square meter in probably 2 to 3 floors. So about 30 square meter plot, about 50 square meter plot, and there is this rich wood carved architecture. So it's really about the architecture of the people. So we have both this. One is the uniqueness evolved due to the cultural exchange between the existing communities and the new administration which came to the city. So Hindu-Islamic architecture of the Sultanate period, and also the local architecture, as I explained in the pole houses. The other story that I want to tell today is, because Professor Joshi also mentioned about buildings being demolished, this is very early case where one building was lost. And but the building was a very common building for any architect, for any expert. The building was not really a significant or exquisite building, one of the ordinary looking simple building. But it belonged to one of the famous poets of the city. And since the building was lost, what to do with that? People came together and they said, we don't want any external funding, we don't need any financial support, and we don't want any strict rules. There were no rules, regulations here, but people came up together. The space is even today a very interesting open space where the building footprints, the floor plans is there on the on form of a platform or an otla, and it acts like a chalk. It acts like a common space, and the sculpture of this poet whose house it was is put there, which is a life-size sculpture. So this is the kind of love and affection that the people has. So once it is lost, what to do? This was the response coming from the people side, and this probably actually defined the success of Heritage Cell that was in Ahmedabad at that time. So the Heritage Cell was more about awareness building. So they used to take heritage walks, talk about it, do a lot of events rather than building regulations or enforcing any laws and bylaws, etc. But this awareness actually made every effort successful. In terms of uniqueness, I mentioned the other part is the continuity. This is picture from one of the 20th century temple, and you can see that it still has that kind of workmanship and that kind of architectural preferences and also continuity. So I don't really want to show the entire temple, but that kind of continuity is still maintained by the local communities. So this initiatives of walk and talk, awareness building, which was the earlier initiative in Heritage Cell, made everything possible because whatever is to be proposed was already discussed with people, everybody was aware, and then it would be accepted, sometimes even defended or opposed, but always corrected whenever required. So this is the kind of chronology of events what happened in Ahmedabad. In 1961, the wooden buildings were listed in a census, which I haven't heard that early of any recognition given to ordinary residential buildings. These are not monuments. Ford Foundation study on the walled city of Ahmedabad, Heritage Cell was established itself in 1996. And then this series of events started, which actually kept the love and affection of heritage in the people, which led to heritage regulations in 2007, which was the first time for the city. We had set certain kind of regulations and legislation support for locally listed building, which is not monuments, which has not to do with any archaeological acts. But the local municipal level bylaws made provisions for protection of locally listed heritage. We did the revisiting of the lists, and in 2014 we also did listing outside the walled city. Our focus has always been in the walled city. In 2017 we got the World Heritage inscription, and also the same year the new trust was founded where I work today. I'll also explain what it is about. But the urban heritage, we have 28 nationally protected monuments, we have 1 state protected monument, and we have number of institutional buildings, which includes temples, schools, hospitals, bird feeders, poll gates, and other common structures, and 2,000 plus residential buildings in the walled city, which are notified under the regulation, as I mentioned, in 2007, which are still in effect in the latest revision in 2019. Outside the walled city, we also have about 300 buildings which are tentatively listed. These are not notified as of yet, but we have already made this document published. So now this, when we talk about legislation, awareness in people, a bridge was there connecting the eastern bank of the river to the western bank, and that bridge needed to be expanded. This is somewhere after the formation of the heritage cell. So obviously the old bridge has to go, new bridge will be built, but this is the historic Ellis Bridge, which was designed by a British engineer, but constructed very, very nicely by our own Indian contractor, which is nothing less than an engineering marvel. So why to get it demolished? People said, no, we want to revise this this planning. So there were 2 bridges added on both the sides. The historic bridge still exists in the center. In this picture, it is not visible, but it's the famous Ellis Bridge of Ahmedabad. But during this expansion, something has to go, and that was the fortification wall, which was adjoining which the bridge was there. Now, one of the bastions that you see today is to be cut off. Again, the history said that when the Ahmad Shah started his first foundation, this was the foundation bridge. How can we let it go? So the negotiation was already made. Whatever could be retained, this probably was not acceptable to our engineers at that time to have this kind of structure just next to a bridge and fort walls going all below it. It's not probably allowed for the engineers, but still that kind of possibilities were explored, retained whatever could be retained, and it has become our celebration place today. So every 26th of February, so every 26th February, we celebrate our Ahmedabad Foundation Day here, and it has become our own place. So again, this was the people's persuasion which made amendments to development project. And this is, in this case, it is clearly a transportation development project, which was unavoidable, but negotiations, wayfinding, maybe right, maybe wrong, but some kind of conclusion was reached and everybody is happy. So again, try to get a win-win situation. The true criteria that I've mentioned, if somebody is interested, criteria 2 is more about the important interchange of human values that is between the Hindu-Islamic architecture and which actually influenced Mughal architecture later. Number 5 is where we have traditional human settlement pattern, where we have buildings adjoining each other, holding each other together, and which has got open courtyard right in the center. But outside, continuously very dense built fabric.
Oh, Trambadia?
Yeah?
Ashish Trambadia.
Yes?
No, I think that is just an,
Okay.
audio
All right.
interrupt.
So in going forward, this is the 28 monuments that I was talking about, and you can see the purple areas which are prohibited zone, and the green areas which are regulated zone by under the AMNSR Act. Rest of it also is defined specifically in the common General Development Control Regulations as the core walled city zone. So there is a specific zone designated here, which has got its own special building bylaws, whether listed or non-listed heritage buildings. And as you
Mr. Trambadia, I think we have to, wind up
quickly. All right.
15 minutes
Sorry.
is okay.
Yeah, so we'll not really get into the details of the ULB's activities, but it has got built, as well as we are doing some research on intangible. The two verticals, which is the department which more looks after the administrative works, and the trust which does consultative works. I'll skip through the city imprints and architecture. These are some of the restoration projects that we have taken up. But quickly to give you the idea, which probably Mr. Joshi also mentioned, in the regulation, we have made certain provisions for incentives. So heritage building owners are forced to restore their building, not really change it or demolish it. But apart from that, they are also given certain financial benefits, and which is not related to the cost of restoration, but related to the place or built up that they are maintaining. So it's very clearly a suggestion that you maintain your building rather than doing massive restoration. So you maintain well, you get more benefits. If you do a massive restoration, or you are compulsorily having to do a massive restoration because you didn't maintain it, your cost of restoration may be more than your TDR benefit itself. We don't get the details of the construction cost or restoration costs. So owners has his own choice very clear. If you maintain it well, your cost of restoration will be less. These are some of the visuals in the pandemic, and one of the worst hit, because the main point of contact itself was railway station, your bus stop, your airport, everything connects to the walled city first and then goes everywhere else. But the fortification, the pole structure helped us also to recover very fast. So at present, walled city has less corona infection than the outer areas of the city. That's it. Thank you so much. And we can move on. For any queries, you can all get back to me on this email ID.
Thank you, Mr. Trambadia, for such a wonderful presentation. We are not going to pose any questions to the presenters right now. All questions will be taken at the end of the discussion session in the next part of the program. So we will move on with our case studies. The next case study will be presented jointly by Ms. Sunaina Mandin and Ms. Kakoli Banerjee on Pondicherry. I will first introduce Ms. Sunaina Mandin. Ms. Sunaina Mandin completed her higher education computer science at the Sri Aurobindo International Center of Education. She co-founded one of India's first computer companies in 1980. Subsequently, she co-founded technology companies with multinational operations, bringing innovative and leading edge products designed in India, manufactured in the Far East, and sold worldwide. She co-founded Pondican in 2007 and the Collective People for Pondicherry's Heritage in 2014. She is currently engaged in both and is also co-editor of Sri Aurobindo's Action, the Journal of India's Resurgence. Ms. Kakoli Banerjee, she holds a postgraduate degree in fashion design from Nottingham Trent University, UK, and she's an alumnus of NIFT Delhi. Having created an ethical fashion brand, Satya Jyoti, which used to retail from Gurgaon, she has moved on into designing, restoring, and running heritage homes and organic farm stays across the country. She now lives in Pondicherry, a town which she loves passionately and is working towards preserving its heritage. She is a founder member of People for Pondicherry's Heritage and a life member of INTAC. Their joint presentation is titled Pondicherry's Heritage, a People's Movement. Over to Ms. Banerjee and Ms. Mandeen.
Thank you, Sukanya. Good evening, everyone. I just need to get this started. Right. That was very insightful from Ashish, because we in Pondicherry always have been looking up at Ahmedabad and we always try to learn from them. because I think they're doing a tremendous job over there. So coming back to what we are going to present is obviously what has been happening in Pondicherry. And the reason why both of us are presenting is because we really are focusing on both tangible, which is built heritage, and the intangible heritage. And so while I talk about more of the tangible heritage, Sunaina will talk about the intangible heritage and the other work that has been happening. A significant thing to point out over here is both of us represent people for Pondicherry's heritage, and we do not have the kind of government support which is required. But despite that, Pondicherry has done extremely well, and we'd like to start by talking about a bit of the history and then taking you through the journey as quickly as we can. So this is a bit of our history. As you all probably know, we've had a very colorful colonial past. We had the Dutch, the Danes, the English, and of course, followed by the French, who came and they lived in Pondicherry, and each one of them left their imprint and the footprint on the landscape of Pondicherry. The map, as you see, the one on the left is the original map of the boulevard town, which was a Dutch plan. And this has evolved into what you see on the right-hand side as the current Pondicherry Boulevard map is as it is now. And as you can see here, we have very distinct precincts already, because this was already as per the profession and the religion that they followed or the nationality of the people. So it was already decided and the precincts were demarcated, which has made a job a little easier for sure. Important to point out over here is the three typological types of buildings that we have, which is essentially starting with the French, because the French precinct has these absolutely beautiful French structures, which have these arches and colonnades and enclosed spaces. So that is the typical French architecture that we have. Then we have in the vernacular Tamil types, which is in Tamil Town. And naturally, what evolved from both of them was the Franco-Tamil architecture, which essentially is in the Tamil Town area, and quite a few of those buildings still they're still there. So I won't go into the details of the architecture here because that would be a completely different subject. But important to notice here again that we don't have monuments. We have all lived in houses. These are different. I'll just go into the stakeholders and who are the owners of these houses. But starting with how we've evolved in terms of our heritage protection is credit has to be given to Intact Pondicherry chapter, because they are the ones who started working with a lot of information that had already been collected and archived by the French, because we had the French Institute and we had the EFEO. So they had already been documenting and recording a lot. And so together, along with them, Intact was able to start documenting each and every building, which had according to different classification, as you can see here. So the lower part of the boulevard, as you can see, has more of these heritage buildings of grade 1 and so forth. This is just an example of the kind of data that was collected for each building. So information cards were made with every possible, let me see if I can zoom into one of the pages to show you a close-up of, no. Yeah, so every possible detail about the particular house or building was collected and cards were made for each building, so that there was enough record kept. Now, these are some of the stakeholders of the French precinct. Interestingly, as you can see, we have the ashram, Sri Aurobindo Ashram. Now, the ashram has many buildings in the French precinct, and they do the maintenance themselves, and they hold on to the original look and they don't make any changes. So that in itself preserves a large part of these structures. We have the French who own some of these buildings. The yellow ones, as you see, that is the one with the arched gate is the IFP. Then this is the French consulate. So they also maintain their buildings very well. On top, that's one of the hotels, which was the Nimrana Hotel, and it has exchanged hands now. But that is, I mean, a lot of commercial buildings which are now operating out of these heritage architectural buildings. So they are the major stakeholders. Then we have the private owners. The extreme bottom right gate that you see, that is the house of one of the earliest residents of Pondicherry, and there are quite a few of them who still live here. So it is essentially a very lived-in area, and all these houses are well looked after. They're taken care of by the institutions or by the owners themselves. Now, the one in the middle, as you see, that's the Raj Niwas. So that is one of the few government buildings which is maintained reasonably well. But that is the area where we need a lot more that needs to be done. That's why, as you see, the government stakeholder as a stakeholder, it's been highlighted because not much is being done there. Now, this is the Tamil quarter, the houses of the Tamil quarter. Here we have these absolutely gorgeous old Tamil houses with their continuous thinnais and talavarams, and we have these really majestic looking Franco-Tamil houses as well. So great potential, but unfortunately, this precinct is not doing well at all. We will discuss in a couple of slides later why that's happening. But just to let you know, these are the major stakeholders who who own or run certain properties over here. Essentially a very commercial area. So a lot of traders, and that could be one of the reasons why we are not seeing this place why they're not able to preserve these houses as much as they should be able to. Quickly going through some slides to show you some of the work that has happened. And here we must give credit to Ajit Kujalgi, who we lost. And so a lot of the work that was done by INTAC to restore these old buildings. This is the I Mandapam. This is the Raj Niwas. This is a good example where this building has not really been restored, but it is used as a bank. It used to be a bank earlier. It still is a bank now, but because it is being used actively, it's not in too bad a condition. So some of these buildings still exist as they were. Heritage walks had become very popular for a long time. It has been popular. Earlier, it was INTAC who did the heritage walks. Now, a lot of private people have come up and they've started doing their own heritage walks. And I think this is a great way for people to see what Pondicherry has to offer, and also for all the local residents to participate in it. They're not just pedestrian walks anymore, because Pondicherry has a great bicycle culture. So there are a lot of bicycle tours and e-bike tours and different kinds of tours that keep coming up. So this is something which has been very popular here. This is the Asia Urbs program, which was done by INTAC in collaboration with European cities who already had World UNESCO Heritage status. And this was a very good project, though it was a short project. It was a good project because it left some very long-lasting, it had a long-lasting impact on on Pondicherry for quite some time to come. And there's certain elements of this project which continue. For example, the branding in terms of signages. This has become something which is very, very accepted, and this is the normal procedure that is followed over here now. We have street signs, we have historical information about each of the buildings, all the names of the roads, which are written both in Tamil and in French, have been retained as they were. The numbering has been standardized. So this creates good branding for Pondicherry as a heritage town, and this is absolutely the practice now. The second thing that has happened is the facade control. Facade control is now what people do on their own, what builders are doing on their own. This is not being imposed. I mean, there is a bylaw which says that the planning authority is supposed to monitor that the facade, but people are doing it willingly simply because they now understand that heritage is selling, heritage sells. So not only are the facades, but heritage has become a buzzword in Pondicherry now. I mean, everything is heritage this or heritage that. which we in some way we think is good, but as long as it is used in the right format and manner and not overused as we saw in some of the slides which Mr. Joshi was presenting, we don't want the kind of crowd or the kind of over commercialization. Right now, we haven't got there yet. It's still, the French precinct is a lovely place to live in. The quality of life is really good. It's people are buying in buying houses here now. They want to come and live here. It is also because of the ashram and because of their lifestyle, because of the nice climate, because of the infrastructure. So it is a good place to live in. And as you can see from this slide, that the houses are looking better.
आजा मेरे पास आजा आजा मेरे पास मेरा बेटा
I think somebody's
स्टिकर चिपका दिया क्या फोन आया
Really sorry about that. We don't know from where this introduction is.
Yeah, sir. Right. Now, having told you all about the good things that have been happening, we had a very dramatic thing that happened with us in 2014, is when we lost Ajit Kujalgi to a freak accident, unfortunately. And because he was leading the heritage movement, he was really making sure he was going out, meeting people, bringing in the funds. He was doing everything to take us forward. And so we lost him. And then within a month or so, the Mairie, which is the iconic building, which used to be the mayor's office, just as the restoration work had started, it collapsed. It just caved in. Thankfully, nobody died in that accident, but that was a very significant event that happened because suddenly the government, they changed their attitude completely and said, oh, you know what, these buildings are not safe. We cannot depend on, I mean, these old buildings, they're just not safe at all. Instantly, they vacated 3 of the most beautiful old schools, which were occupied schools, I mean, government schools, which were running over there. They vacated the schools. And that is when, because we didn't have Ajit anymore, we as people of Pondicherry, we came together to try and say that, you know, this is just because the building was not maintained properly, doesn't mean that it was unsafe, because we know, we live in these buildings ourselves, that they're not really unsafe buildings. So that is when Dr. Arun Menon he came in from Chennai IIT. He and his team, they did a complete thorough study on these buildings, and he did give a report saying that all these buildings can be restored, and it was very scientific study. But despite that, the 3 schools which were vacated were never, I mean, they're still in that vacant state. Nothing has been done about them. Interestingly, we made a compromise with the government, and the government finally, the Mairie is being rebuilt to the same footprint and look, not the same material, unfortunately, but at least it looks the same. So that has been achieved, and we are hoping it'll be ready very soon. Now, in terms of what exactly, as far as legal tools and government mechanism or any kind of mechanism, what do we have in Pondicherry? So after all this happened in 2015, a state-level heritage conservation and advisory committee was formed. They listed 21 public buildings as heritage. So we were like really happy that, oh, you know, things will happen now, but nothing happened. I mean, after doing all that, we realized that the SL...
Ma'am, I think I have to remind you about the time limit.
I will try and wrap it up. So anyway, here, all the information that we have here is about why the SLHC does not work. The building bylaws which we have is, they really do not, I mean, one of the greatest example is the buildings which are lying vacant and abandoned. They're not being demolished because you're not allowed to demolish them, but trees are being allowed to grow out of these buildings, and so that they collapse on their own. So at the end of the day, it doesn't serve the purpose. That is how it's working right now. There's a Pondicherry Smart City mission in which there is an agenda to restore these schools, but again, no work has started yet. This is to discuss the economics and the fact that tourism is the driving force in Pondicherry. That is what is working over here for us, and it is becoming more and more popular as a tourist destination because of its heritage factor. Again, until regulations are made, we might just overdo it, and we do not know how it will be controlled at that point. This is a graph to show that tourism has been going up constantly and rapidly. Heritage management in Pondicherry is done only by INTAC. There is no other body, there is no other cell, there is no one else. It is the INTAC is the only body, and they have limited support themselves. So we try and work with INTAC as much as possible, but not enough support from the government. This is Pondicherry Heritage Festival. Now, Sunaina will quickly take us through what the people are doing for Pondicherry to preserve our heritage. Sunaina.
Hello, can anybody see me or hear me?
Yes, ma'am, you can be heard and seen.
Okay. I will quickly combine the last 3 slides of our presentation, which talk about not just the built heritage. For us and for everyone, heritage naturally is heritage in all its aspects. So we start with what we were gifted with on this beautiful planet of ours, which is our natural heritage. And then we come to the spiritual heritage and the cultural heritage. And finally, there is the built heritage. And the Pondicherry Heritage Festival is a festival of the people, co-organized by INTAC, Pondican, and the People for Pondicherry's Heritage, with more and more increased participation from all kinds of different people, all kinds of different groups, all ages, people coming forward to participate, offering different events, opening their houses. Most of the cultural events are held at heritage locations. We celebrate our poets, we celebrate our writers, we celebrate our philosophers. And the comprehensiveness of this heritage of Pondicherry goes back to the Chola period, at least, where we have temples from the Chola period. And there I bring in also the natural heritage. Kakoli, maybe you can go to the next slide, which starts with our beach, which was a beautiful beach in Pondicherry, which unfortunately disappeared. Now, one of the sad things is that conservation and restoration of heritage is required primarily because heritage gets destroyed by man, by human beings. There are those rare occasions when heritage is destroyed by natural events. You know, you have a cyclone, you have a tsunami, you have storms, you have an earthquake. But most of the time, or age, building just ages and disappears. But most of what we are working with all over the world is the neglect of human beings, of their own heritage in all its aspects. So I particularly mentioned the beach of Pondicherry because that was a beautiful beach that we all loved, swam on and ran on and did all kinds of events on. It was gone because there was a harbor which was built, not understanding the whole ecosystem. And that was one of the main things that Pondican took up since our inception in 2007. And this is, I bring this up also because it is one of those rare occasions on which everyone, including starting with the government of India, the local government of Pondicherry, with all its departments, experts like NIOT and civil society, all worked to find a appropriate and soft and proper and innovative solution to bring our beach back. And from start to finish, all these groups work together. And in 2017, as you can see from that photo there, the beach came back using very, very innovative technology for the first time in the country. And even, you know, it's pretty unique in the world as well. So the beaches is one thing. The next thing is forests. Forests are also a gift that we have on our beautiful Mother Earth. There are forests, there are urban forests, there are sacred groves. And all these are highlighted in our festivals, and different groups come up to talk about this, to arrange visits to these places so that people start knowing what the heritage is. We believe that you protect and you take care of what you love. And in order to love something, you have to know what it is. So we start with introducing people to what is around them so that they fall in love with it and then they want to protect it. So the third thing is the system tanks. It was a man-made thing. The system tanks in Pondicherry is a legacy of the Cholas, and that's what made this whole area, the Tanjore belt, into the rice bowl of Tamil Nadu. And it is a series of water bodies conceived and built 1,000 years ago and still surviving today. So there's a lot of work that's going on in restoring these. And very interestingly, as a result of highlighting this in our 2019 festival, the whole community around one of these water bodies took it up, and now it's they who maintain it. And this is an effort that we are working on for all such water bodies in Pondicherry. The other thing is that when we look at heritage, it goes back from ancient times. It goes back from our natural heritage, which, like I said, came with the earth through the entire time, all the way down to the colonial architecture and the colonial heritage. And in a way, Pondicherry is very fortunate to have this kind of enclosed boulevard area, which automatically forms, like Ahmedabad's wall city, it forms a kind of a heritage precinct. Kakoli, you can go to the next slide, please. And in 2009, to celebrate 100 years of Sri Aurobindo's arrival in Pondicherry, we made a proposal along with INTAC to the government of Pondicherry as well as the government of India for a complete revitalization project of the boulevard city called the Renaissance of Pondicherry. Unfortunately, this very ambitious project did not see light of day. We did not get the necessary funding, but ever since that time, bits and pieces of funding is coming, and bits and pieces of that project are being executed, though not all in its entirety. Last slide, Kakoli. So in conclusions, what are our strengths? One thing I want to mention about the Heritage Festival, just 2 minutes, is that we get a little funding from the government, we get a little funding from INTAC, but most of it is people coming forward and doing it on their own. So what we have really started, this was the 6th year that we celebrated the Pondicherry Heritage Festival, is a complete people's movement. So we have clearly demarcated precincts, well-recorded data, INTAC and other organizations are active. Residents and owners are sold on the idea, and they believe in their town being beautiful. People's movement is quite active, and heritage forms a very, very important and significant part of the 4th Smart City mission of Pondicherry. Now, what needs to be done is much, much more political will, understanding, and appreciation. Whenever I've talked to people from the government and I tell them about the beauty of a structure where the walls breathe, I get complete blank looks. Now, I feel that departments of the PWD, as well as the town and country planning, they need to understand about the what these structures mean and how it is important and what do they represent to all of us, you know. So government PWD participation is needed in everything, including natural heritage protection as well. Natural heritage sometimes, particularly when it's linked to water, is more easy to understand. So it's a little more easy to have a collaboration.
Yes, I think we have to stop here.
That's it. We are at the end.
Okay.
So Kakoli, the last slide, and thank you very much. And one thing I would like to mention is 2 years ago, we created this coloring book, which drew in children, and children we feel are a very important part of any involvement in any heritage conservation. And there's more and more kids getting involved in it in Pondicherry. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We will now move on to the second session for this evening. It will be a discussion session moderated by Mr. Vikram Ji Chakraborty. Vikram Ji Chakraborty graduated from Jadavpur University and did his post-graduation in architectural conservation from SPA New Delhi. He was involved in preparing the comprehensive conservation management plan of Red Fort, Delhi, a project that enriched his decision-making and management skills, along with pragmatic knowledge for working on World Heritage sites. Later, he worked on the tourism development plan for Amritsar in Punjab, mapping cultural resources to identify projects for developing infrastructure and tourism facilities. From 2008 to 2010, he worked with the Aga Khan Foundation and was responsible for the conservation works on the World Heritage Site of Humayun's tomb and adjacent areas, using 3D laser scanning technology to document the site. His individual capacity project, Restoration of Palace Building in Khetri, Rajasthan, was jointly funded by the state and central governments. It is a successful experiment of efficient use of funds in a conservation project by adopting appropriate decision-making strategies. His ongoing work jointly with a Dutch architect, adaptive reuse of an ancestral haveli of a leading business group at Nalwa, Haryana, is another experiment to derive an appropriate design language to convert a historical ruins into a meaningful contemporary space. He is also an academician and has been associated with several well-known institutions. Currently, he is an associate professor at RV College of Architecture, Bangalore. He is an active member of ICOMOS and coordinator of the National Scientific Committee on Heritage Documentation. Presently, he is working on methods of capturing the dynamic relationship of the drivers of urban transformation in the Indian context. I now hand over the proceedings to Mr. Vikram Ji Chakraborty.
Thank you, Sukanya. It is a wonderful evening today, and we are able to see a lot of interesting discussion. And I will not waste much time and directly over to our next session. So in this session, we have 4 discussants, Dr. Kuriakose, Debashish Nayak, Kirtida Unwalla, and Kiran Kalamdani. And we will start with Dr. Kuriakose with a small discussion and presentation about his experience. I think Dr. Kuriakose, we are all aware about his career. Has started in 1984, received basic lessons in architecture under the patronage of Laurie Baker. After receiving the Charles Wallace Fund for the Masters in Conservation Studies from York, and he received his doctorate from IIT Madras. Yeah. And Benny is known more for his work for the design of public buildings and transplantation of the buildings of Kerala. Specifically, one of his renowned projects, that is Action Chitra, which is, and again, Mochiris. These are all projects. I think everybody can see the slide. It will be there. I would like to request Dr. Kuriakose, please put on your video and just illuminate us about the change and transformations which you have addressed in your project. Over to Dr. Kuriakose.
Okay, I'm starting. I don't have any slides to show.
It's okay, yeah.
Mr. Kuriakose, just a minute, please. Bikramjit, will you please switch on your video and ask all the discussants also to switch on their videos, not their audio.
Yeah, yes. Only the discussants, please put on the video. Dr. Kuriakose, Debashish, Kirtida Unwalla, and Kiran Kalamdani.
Okay, shall I start? Okay.
Yes, please.
Okay, I'm talking about the Alleppey Heritage Project, which we have been doing for the last 3 years. Alleppey is locally known as Alappuzha, like Mumbai and Bombay. This is a 100% government project. We have been involved with the preparation of the conservation development plan. We don't call it management plan in the typical UNESCO language. We don't call it master plan because we wanted to ensure that it is called conservation development plan to tell the community that conservation and development can go together. Now, coming to the legal aspects, we are not planning to bring in any legislation because most of our laws are negative. You shouldn't do that. You should take permission. This cannot be done. That cannot be done. The model that we have followed in Alleppey, we are following in Alleppey about work, about 70 crores work is going on after the preparation of the draft master plan. We always call it draft because we want changes to be incorporated as we go along. The project and the master plan is evolving over a period of time. And as I said, no legislation is being planned because we have the example of the Fort Kochi, which was the first area where heritage laws were brought for the first time in Kerala. As a result, what has happened, many of the buildings were demolished when the laws were introduced. Because when you do not have an efficient mechanism to implement the laws, what is the point in having the laws? When there is a mechanism which is corrupt, and then what is the point in having? So that's why we decided. What happens as a result is that they have to get one more permission from one more agencies. So that is one of the reasons. So we followed a model where the community is made aware of the projects and community owns up the project. But today I'm not talking about the community aspect of the project, how the community is owning the project. Now coming to the economics of the project, we are looking at convergence of funds from various departments. Department of Tourism has one because they are the funding agency, major funding agency. And there is the Department of Kaya because there are a lot of old Kaya factories there. There are the Department of Irrigation is cleaning up the canals, which is also part of the project. But bulk of the funding, about, I will say 2/3 of the funding is coming from a investment agency set up by thing. They are not dependent on government funds. They raise funds from the market, including masala bonds and all those things from the London Stock Exchange, etc. It is called Kerala Infrastructure Development Board. So we take funds. So we have to give the cost benefit ratio. And what we try to do is very difficult in a heritage project to talk about because they have state standards. It is not the government government engineers are not at all involved in the analysis of these projects. So they have their own yardstick. They have consultants who analyze each project. So what we try to do is very difficult to look at the cost benefit because they are very particular that the project should be beneficial. So we talk about the social cost and the social benefits. So we try to argue with them. In some projects, they don't give, they ask a lot of questions, and this is going on and on for a long period of time. Then coming to the management aspect of the project, what is happening is that government has set up a company for managing heritage projects. Alleppey Heritage Project is the third project of the government of Kerala. After that, another 3 heritage projects have been announced. Another 2 more are in the pipeline. But Mussooris Heritage Project is the pilot project of the government of Kerala. And so government has established a company, 100% government-owned company, Mussooris Projects Limited, and they are in charge of most of the heritage projects, except Talisheri, they are in charge of all the heritage projects. All the MLAs of the area are there. The tourism minister is the chairman. The director of archaeology is a board member. The director of tourism is a board member. So it is a 100% government control. Why the company is established is because they do not have to go through all the government procedures. It's still, even in the company, we have to follow the 3 courts. We have to get 3 courts to do, but the delay which happens by moving files from one department to the other doesn't happen here. And in this project, there is a huge research component, academic content. So as part of this, we have a research center which is established. with a former professor of history from the Department of History from Delhi, Professor Keshavan Vadatta. He is the director of this research institute. So they support the research component of it. But we have so many researchers working on the project for each component, each aspect, because when you get, what my role is mainly as a consultant, overall consultant of the project. We are one of the success, I will say, in the Musuris Heritage Project, Alleppey Heritage Project is that consultants are given tremendous freedom in this project, because we don't have to look at many of the other things as part of the project. We have powers to look at the quality of the implementation, and I am part of all the committees which are form part of the project, which helps. So I have a say in the kind of movies or documentaries made. I have a say in the documentation. I have a say in the research. So that way, the way the government does, and the works are being carried out by various departments, including PWD and various other agencies. We have a project manager for major part of the project, which is a project management company, which has been selected. So this is the overall structure of the project. And so the decision making is that the board makes the decisions. So most of the things, except for financing aspects, the government is funding part of the project. We have nothing to do with the government. The company is able to take decisions on a day-to-day basis. Mr. Naushad, he is the managing director of the company, and he has tremendous freedom to do the thing, and that is the way we work. So we tried, this was the answer by the Kerala government in trying to make sure that the typical red tapeism, which is part of the government, doesn't affect the project, because the company has a lot of freedom. That's all that I just want to say. I think my time has exceeded. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Sorry, there are some technical issues also. That's why the videos are not working. Now, our next discussant, Mr. Debashish Nayak, is leading person related to the Ahmedabad Heritage Movement. Past several decades, he is there. And I would like to share a small film which he has asked us to share with all of you. It's just a 5-minute video, and we will just see that first. Over to the film. I hope it is visible.
We can't hear the audio.
Wanted to look at and review the heritage status of 3 Indian cities, Hyderabad, Jaipur and Ahmedabad. And they had sent officials from the city municipality to Rome, ICOMOS, to study and set up the whole system. And in that process, there are some awareness about the heritage issues in those 3 cities. And fortunately, in Ahmedabad, one architect was there who was involved, Mr. Majmudar, and he was sent to Rome to study heritage, and they set up. So there was an awareness. But in 1996, there was a very progressive municipal commissioner was there called Keshav Verma. He through Mr. Ghosh, P.K. Ghosh, who is right now is the chairman of the Heritage Committee, he told me that Debashish, if you can come to Ahmedabad and do something with the heritage of Ahmedabad. So I came over and spent some time and realized that the citizen really doesn't know the city. So the whole process started with that, and it's a heritage walk, which we thought would be a very important tool to make first Ahmedabadis appreciate their own city. If you look at India as a country, there are nearly 7,000 historic towns and cities in India. So almost every city is eligible to become a World Heritage town or city. But Ahmedabad is one of them. The interesting part is that it was very few people knew that Ahmedabad was the biggest city in India before British came. And it is actually living for last 600 years very actively. So that makes Ahmedabad very unique. And if you look at the history, it is one of the most highly documented city. Like all the mosque of Ahmedabad has really evolved from the Jain architecture and is a unique typology. The process took nearly 20 years of journey. And in the process, people of Ahmedabad really have gone through and through the understanding this whole process through various initiatives, and because it was done through the municipal corporation, so there is a lot of respect has been built between the citizen and the political power and also the city administration. But we still have a long way to go. We have to have, because the sheer number, if you look at all other heritage cities in the world, there are maybe one small neighborhood of maybe 1/30th part of the world city of Ahmedabad. But Ahmedabad's sheer size and number of buildings is so many that it is a big challenge. So I think the main problem will be, and the challenge is that how you take everybody along and manage, create a situation where these thousands of houses are managed and preserved. So it is a long road ahead. See, logically, if you start work with initiative with the NGO or a local history groups, you can restore maybe 10, 15 and 100 buildings. But if you only have to restore a whole city, it needs the policy change. And that's why the role of municipal corporation is extremely important to participate in that. So when Ahmedabad Municipal Corporation called me to help the municipality to set up a heritage department and create heritage initiative or awareness program, it was a big positive thing. That was, I think, the beginning of the success story happened. But other cities, similar things, if you want to do, if the process has to happen, it should happen through the municipal corporation or the local government. Only then the policy could be changed. Only then the municipal administration should be part of the process. That's why everywhere we work, we always initiated with the heritage walk, because unless the citizen, all the people who govern the municipal corporation are the municipal councillors, and municipal councillors are elected by the citizens. So if you want to bring in citizens' participation, you have to bring in the municipal councillors and political support. So that's why the citizens' knowledge about their own city is very fundamental, and where the municipality plays a very important role.
So here we will stop, and I think as we are running out of time, so if Debashish sir just share few words now, or else you can respond while we will put up a question. It is your choice, sir.
Yeah, I think we'll go at the end when you have put up these questions. Yeah, that will be better.
Okay. Thank you so much, sir. Now I will move to Kirtida Unwalla. Again, I'd request please share the slide. Yes, ma'am is involved with a lot of projects in Mumbai, and her association with Mumbai Metropolitan Region Heritage Conservation Society and INTAC, and especially the projects related to Port Mumbai she is like to talk about. She has a small presentation, and I will share those slides very quickly. She's also associated with the educational institution, Kamala Rahija Vidyanidhi Institute. So I'm just quickly share the presentation, and over to ma'am. Welcome, ma'am.
Thank you, Bikramjit. Since we are running late, I think I'll quickly jump into.
Sorry, I'm doing a little faster. I'm really sorry.
No problem. So these slides basically have to be seen only as markers for me to convey what I have to convey as far as Mumbai is concerned. Can you hear me properly? Please let me know.
Yes.
So Mumbai.
And slides are visible?
Yes, they are visible. Yes.
Yeah.
At least to me.
Thank you.
Yes. Thank you very much. Yes. So to begin with, Mumbai has, as we all know, has been a pioneer in the setting up of the recognition of heritage conservation and a way forward for it to have a policy for a city like Mumbai, because Mumbai being a very highly commercial and the biggest economical center of the country, very aptly it took the lead in recognition of heritage conservation and converted that necessity into the first policy that came about in the year 1991. And one cannot forget the contribution of Mr. Shyam Chainani, who has been at the helm of this prerogative to have the heritage listing as well as guidelines and the heritage law inserted into the city, which then transferred on to the rest of the country. And so what we call as the DCR 67 was initiated as a draft in 1991. The journey continued in 1995 and it became a final list. And furthermore, as it was just said in the previous by Debashish Nayak, that it is important that there is a contribution from the government and government like-minded officials. If they become active, there's a lot of activity happening in the scenario of conservation of the built and the intangible heritage. And that is exactly what happened in the case of Mumbai. A very positive response was given to Mr. Chainani's request, and all this happened very, very fast for the case of Mumbai. In 1997, once again, the MMR Heritage Conservation Society came forward and gave a very small but very handsome for the purpose, a quantum of funding, a seed funding to identify more heritage lists and heritage assets. And today it covers the entire MMR region. I was fortunate to have worked in one or two of these projects of listing initially. And Bikramjit, you can go to the next slide. So this is the first fort precinct that was identified. The previous slide, which has got us a lot of, it is an amalgamation of many character zones, different character zones which got identified. It's a very large area, governed very well, a huge amount of success stories with fort precinct and so on. The rest of the smaller precincts which were strewn all over the city, at least up to the Bandra and the Dadar area, are what you see here. They're much smaller in size. And the issue here was that the heritage regulations, which were set up for the precincts as well as for the buildings, did not do so well, for the simple reason that there was a huge amount of overlap between the ownership patterns and the land use patterns and the legal rights that the people had over development and so on. And so these precincts did not do well at all. With the funding of MMR HCS, you can go on to the next one. Next slide, Bikramjit. So more precincts were identified. I was fortunate to have worked on one of these. But unfortunately, the issues of tackling the economic aspects of making these regulations stick to the fullest, I think, was not undertaken right through. And eventually, when the list happened all the way for the whole MMR region, even then, this opportunity of looking at the typical queasiness of the overlapping and the overarching policies was missed out. And so till today, it remains a lacuna. And therefore, in spite of being the first city, in spite of having a lot of positive participation from citizens, at least now, initially in 1991, right up to 1999, we did not have so much of participation. And as a fallout, what has happened is that it is only the fort precinct which is a success story. Most of the stories of the fort precinct conservation has gone into receiving, I think, almost 16 UNESCO heritage awards and so on. But sadly, it does not trickle down into. And so maybe it is my personal observation that this should not have happened, and it should have percolated into the rest of MMR as well. Next.
Yeah. It is come. Yes.
So here, this was one more smaller precinct. I'm just illustrating it as a case where there was some amount of concern that I had tried to bring in, looking at the Rent Control Act and the properties in the running in the cess category and so on. But the attempt has still been very, very minuscule, and it has not been solved at all. The only tool that was brought in for heritage conservation, in favor of heritage conservation, was TDR. And TDR, because of these overlapping and overarching policies, just did not work and will not work in the city of Mumbai. And this needs to be explored in more details while looking at managing heritage conservation sites. As far as the other funding agencies are concerned, again, only restricted to the 4th precinct was private enterprise, as CSR, INTAC, some more heritage conscious NGOs working, and MMRHCS has also started to fund, and this has started almost since last 10 years. So the story continues, and we can continue with the next slide. These slides are only illustrative of the projects. There was a different story that I encountered in the case of Matheran. You can go further. These are cessed buildings. So Matheran, being a hill station and of a very specific, this is something that I wanted to just mention, that Mumbai, within its core, within its 4th precinct, has 2 principal World Heritage sites. And this was a case of the Esplanade Mansion, which has also failed because of the same reason that I mentioned. Rent control is one, the other is overarching policies. But to differ slightly in the rent control and the aspect of overarching policies, I would say in the case of Mumbai, very strangely, it is this very particular Rent Control Act that has allowed so many of these nominal built forms and character of the city to survive, for us to see today at least. We don't know what is the course of action in the future, but at least today a lot of it is present simply because of the inertia which was built in, which came in with as a package with the Rent Control Act. Next. So Matheran was something that I just wanted to deviate a little bit. We'll come back here a little later. Can stay with this. Don't have to go to the slide of Matheran. But Matheran was a complete interactive kind of a decision taken, because it was Matheran people who had approached INTAC to carry out a comprehensive listing and give them guidelines. And that happened in a very successful story. But once again, at the end of the day, when the draft heritage regulation was finalized, very sadly, just last year, we came to know that in spite of it being declared a eco-sensitive zone, all the natural heritage which we had identified was completely deleted. And once again, we have to go to the threshold of knocking the doors of the court, which has already been done by BEAG, the parent group which did the listing. So BEAG is looking into it, but then it's a sad story all the way. What you see here is one of the stories in which I had participated within the 4th precinct once again. If you go further down, next slide, please. This is a private property, which is very famously called the Zara stores. Next slide, please.
Yeah.
So here the economics worked in a very different way, and because of the Rent Control Act. But here the premises was taken over. It was bought over by a single owner and then converted into this single-use, single ownership flagship store. So the story again is very different, which means that people of Mumbai, in their individual capacity, do have the wherewithals to do actions like this. But then it is again only limited. So private buildings have a lot of lethargy. but most of the public buildings have been a success story. And that is a story of Mumbai that I would like to share with you. And we can stop here.
Yeah. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you
Sorry,
very much.
we are a little
Yes.
bit of harsh to
No
all
problem.
of you. And
Please continue. Yes.
Yeah. Thank you so much. And now I would like to welcome our next discussant, Mr. Kiran Kalamdani. Kindly have slide, please.
Yeah.
Just the next slide, please.
Hello, can I share my screen?
Yes, you can share. You are now co-host. You can share your screen.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, welcome, sir.
Okay, can you see it? It's visible?
Yes, it is visible, sir.
Yeah, thank you.
Not yet. Can you reshare, please? It is not visible.
It's not visible yet.
The screen is visible.
Yeah, I'm trying to make it visible. Meeting controls. Your screen sharing is what it says.
I think this slide has to be removed first.
No, it's all right. We can see
Okay.
your PowerPoint. I think third slide has the image of a building in a snowy area.
You can see that now? Yeah, okay,
Yes,
Yes.
Yeah, okay. There are just a few projects that I will talk of as a background for this whole subject of the economics, the legislation, and the management tools for conservation. And I begin with this Mayavati Advaita Ashram, which is in the hills of Uttarakhand, in the Kumaon Hills, where we recently did a project. And this was a building where Vivekananda visited. It was actually set up as an ashram, as an international place for research on the Advaita Vedanta principles, and where people from all over the world were supposed to come and do this research. Of course, they do. And after 120 years, this building, which looked like that, somewhere in December 2017, when we first reached it, after doing a conservation of that, is now that one. It's like that. Probably the people in Kolkata might know more about it because they're closer to the Belur Math and the Ramakrishna Mission. And the thing about this one is that there was no legislation for conservation that I could find any in the Uttarakhand area. And we had to go by instinct and go by the sanction of the Ramakrishna Math in this area. But one of the oldest projects that we talk about, and our first project that was asked of Marthand Singh to do when we were back from York in 1991 was the Shaniwar Wada, and this was our intact project for which we had made this view. It took about 10 years for this to come to this stage, and largely because of bureaucrats like Mr. B.G. Deshmukh, who was the ex-cabinet secretary, who could actually have that change come about. And this foreground of Shaniwar Wada is given over to the people over here. And Shongomitra was here last 2 years ago, and she was taken around to see this place. So this project, which started, immediately after we came back from York, has been going on for the last 30 years, still not complete. But one could say that this was a happy combination of the ASI, a kind of NGO like Intact telling ASI what to do, the ASI taking it up, and the Pune Municipal Corporation, which actually owned the land, actually taking up the implementation of this. Now, this has been followed by a lot of heritage walks, and there you can see the beginning of some of the heritage walks that is being taken around the old city into the front of Shaniwar Wada Gate, and also on the right. This is the Tulsi Bagh, and you can see that fellow in the white who was the mayor at that time, taking around the people. So as Debashish Nayak said, that it's very important that the local legislators and the strongmen they sort of get around and stand behind your project, which is a very important management ethic that we have learned the hard way over the years. I'll go to another project, which was the architectural illumination of the CST at Mumbai. And here a scheme was made, and we had asked the chief secretary who had asked us to make this lighting scheme as to whether we should take permission from the heritage committee. And the chief engineer of the railways said, no, we don't have to take permission from the heritage committee. I said, why? Because it is there in our agreement and we're supposed to do that by law and things like that. He said, if you start going to heritage committees, it will take at least 3 years. And so he said, don't worry, we'll take care of whatever eventuality that comes out of that. And we went ahead and did this scheme, which is now 5 years old. To get itself off the board, it took 6 years. But 5 years later, this is implemented, and now it is in implementable position also. Take the example of this UNESCO Asia Pacific award-winning scheme. This is an award of merit that came in 2014, and this was in rural Satara, in the Satara district, which is south of Pune, and a small village that is about 20 kilometers east of the district town of Satara. Was where a completely unprotected site was worked on. It got the UNESCO Award of Merit in that year, and that's the plaque for that. A similar little temple right in the middle of Pune city, and we asked the person who was paying for it whether we should go for the heritage approval, because there is a committee and things like that, though it was not a statutory document, because Pune was far behind than Bombay, and I agree with what Benny Kuriakose said in the beginning, that if you don't have a mechanism to actually implement it, and in parts Kirtida also said that if you don't have that mechanism, there's no point in having a law and a statutory sort of background in India. Of course, this project was wonderfully implemented and it was hailed by everyone. And finally, I show you some pictures of this council hall, which is actually where the divisional commissioner sits. And he said that let us not go to the heritage committee again, because that is just a nuisance. So that's the head of the establishment saying that we went, we took the permission and we got the work done here in the best of the method and using the best of materials, stained glass, gold leaf and all that. And that's the final result where now the district administration of 5 districts sits and does its work. Lastly, there is this very large intangible heritage conservation project, and what you're seeing an aerial view of the Pandharpur Ghats. During this week, about 17 lakh people, they travel from Pune district to Solapur district, a distance of about 250 kilometers. And they do that and they all assemble at these places where earlier there were no ghats properly. This middle stretch where you see this stretch without people is where there were no ghats, and about 5-6 years ago, the whole project started to actually make the ghats. These were some of the views that were made up by our office and some of the implementation that has already started. Now, here is a 1,000 crore project that has been launched by the government of Maharashtra, which shows its commitment towards this intangible heritage and the kind of teachings of the saints, Jnaneshwar and Tukaram Maharaj and so many others. So I think in conclusion, I would like to say that it's very necessary to know what actually works in a particular situation. Last year, when we all had met in Bhopal, trying to talk about the conservation architects community, Professor A.G.K. Menon, who is our teacher and who is now the chairman of this conservation architects community, said to us that it's like the cricket and the IPL. The Indians made that IPL work as a wonderful success story. So in our state, you cannot make our towns look like the European towns. You cannot make them look like they're somewhere else. They have to become like Indian towns, and we have to find our own solutions that actually work in our context. And as far as the economics, the management, and the regulations are concerned, the heritage regulations are concerned, I think we should evolve to a state where we find what is actually possible and try and do that. So I'll leave you with those thoughts. I think I'm already done with my time. Thank you, Bikramjit.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Kiran sir. I think now I would like to ask a question, but as per our decided schedule, I'm just skipping a little bit. I'm going to Mr. Debashish Nayak. If he is here, kindly switch on your video, please, sir. Yeah. So my question to Debashish sir, if you can very pinpointedly answer that, do you think that heritage values are perpetual, a constant entity? And do you have any specific, or do you suggest any specific method which helps us to identify those values very tangibly? And does it always play an important role to make the precinct resilient in case of very critical situation right now we were facing, the pandemic situation? And we were also talking about over last couple of times. So what is your views in terms of the heritage values, and from where those values we inculcate, from where we get those values, identify those values, and how they play an important role in heritage precincts? If you can share your thoughts. And specifically, you have the experience of North Calcutta as well as Ahmedabad very strongly. And yes, please, over to Sam. Very
Yes,
briefly, if you can share.
Thank you, Bikram. And I think this is a very interesting question. And I'd also look at Benny's work and also Kiran's work, because we also know each other for many, many years. And we have shared situations with each other all the time. In fact, my work in Calcutta was actually documented by Kiran, and he presented me a small book about this process in Calcutta, what he thought was very interesting. But looking back, the 35 years of work, you actually, what I have seen, and also in Ahmedabad 25 years, you actually work from, I've been working with 4 generations. And over the 4th generation, the value changes. But there is a connection. So in case of Ahmedabad, the original family, the community strength was different. Then it got into the reinventing or redefining the values. And now the new generation look at it in a very differently. But there are 3-4 points which runs through the whole process. One is the sense of appreciation and sense of pride. Second is that using the sense of appreciation and sense of pride to create a enable situation which is quietly converted into legal format. And also from the beginning, one have to be very creative about the finance. Like when I first landed up in Ahmedabad, I realized that MP, MLA, councillors have quite a good amount of budget, which is never utilized. So what we did, we every 31st March, before that we did all the estimates, smaller project, and got the budget approved. And so the councillors, MP and MLA's budget has been utilized properly. Otherwise, at the end of the day, just simply wasted on redoing the footpaths or doing lampposts or benches. And another thing we did, and a lot of planning was done very quietly, like a street nameplate, because every street has a history. The nameplate has a history. Today, if you come to Ahmedabad, you'll see that every street has a nameplate. And it was quietly done by very small, maybe 1,000 rupees per plate by the councillor's budget. And councillor was more than happy to support that, because it has to be approved by the item and the collector has to approve that item. Because initially the restoration was not part of the item which has been approved by the collector to be spent by MP, MLAs. Like we have around 120 bird feeders. So initially we make some of these councillors and MPs, MLAs give their budget for restoration of this bird feeder. And eventually it became approved. So I think creative financing and Ahmedabad's success is beside the getting support of the people, which Ashish showed you us in the like Kavi Dalpatram. A lot of poets and been used as a creative public space. So so I feel that and then while you're working for some time, the law become a part of your life. You can't pull down the building, means you cannot pull down the building, and but it also has to be supported by the people's, and also the media plays a very, very important role. And also we have very successful like Pondicherry, like I've been working with Ajit for many, many years. I mean, we really miss him. But whatever we learned, I always kept on replicating in various cities in India, so that this we keep on learning from each other and sharing the thing. So coming back to your original question of values always will change, but there one have to establish a connection and then translate them into some kind of a legal process. That acceptance has to be there, and it has to be translated into some kind of financial mechanism, which is many of the fund is underutilized or non-utilized. So one have to be very creative. So it is a total process which really, and one have to keep on watching. And interesting is that you have to hand over and create new generation of people. Like today I am out and Ashish is in, but I am out, but still I am there I go there to have some tea sometime. So there is a continuity, but the ownership is taken by the new generation. That is very, very important.
Thank you so much, sir. I think it's a very interesting part, and the way you have articulated that the relevance of value discourse in the regeneration process. It is wonderful. I would like to
just one more point, that one has like legal thing. The court plays a very important role. In Calcutta, the Calcutta High Court order was very important. Similarly, in Ahmedabad, many court cases which actually made the legislation possible. So understanding law and court is also very important.
Thank you, sir. My next question is Dr. Beni Kuriakose. How you have handled the change and transformation need in your master plans when you have done the conservation plan? How you have addressed the change and transformation, the need for change within the community and its reflection in the built heritage? That you have to unmute yourself, please.
See, one of the things is that what happens with most of the master plans is that it takes 2-3 years minimum to get prepared. What happens as a result, the people who have initiated the process will lose interest in that. Either if it's a bureaucrat or it's a politician. Everybody, I mean, bureaucrats are normally 3 years in their position. Politicians are 5 years in that position. So why we called it a conservation development plan and we call it a draft plan. Even the conservation development plan prepared for Muziris 12 years ago is still a draft plan because it gives that flexibility. You can make changes to it. You can add further monuments. And when you do something in a short time, say, then it is not easy that you would have omitted some monuments, you would have included something wrongly. So all these flexibilities is very important. Master plans do not have that flexibility. The stand that we have taken was that as far as monuments are concerned, as far as heritage is concerned, the community, I mean, can have a say what is to be conserved. But how it is to be conserved is to be decided by the experts. If community starts inquiring or questioning how conservation is done, then it is a problem. That we wanted the experts to be.
Very wonderful point you have shared, that what can be guided, but how we have to just only enable them, empower them, and leave it to them. Yeah, wonderful.
Yeah, no, this keeps coming. For example, one of the protected monuments I'm doing conservation now, we are doing a compound wall. This is first basic measure. The compound walls were damaged. Now the community, I mean, the local people have come and objected to the compound wall construction, saying that the road width is not enough. Please put the wall inside. What will you do in such a case? So we are trying to negotiate it with the community. What we are trying to say, you are saying the road width, but let the road be there, let the pedestrian path can be through inside of the monuments, which is there in many cases, but we can't take the compound wall inside. So all these kind of issues which is there has to be negotiated with the community, and that is what is very much required. And the primary objective is to make sure that the heritage values and all those things are conserved, the character is maintained. So all those things have to be negotiated. It is very, very important for the professional to take care of that. But if the professional happens to be not having a say, and if it is a bureaucrat or a politician having a say, then it's a problem. So that happens in many cases. Many of our heritage is destroyed in spite of the fact there is a professional involved in the project, is because some others come and try to dictate terms, which is very difficult. But in Kerala, the advantage is that the awareness has grown, although the legislation is not in place. In many of the heritage sites, people know. I mean, that's just like, I mean, in one of the talks in Pondicherry, everything is heritage. I said we started with Mussooris Heritage Project 12 years ago. Now at least 7-8 heritage projects are there, which consists of most of the cities. Now everybody wants that. Heritage has become a buzzword, which is good, but it has to be conserved in the right manner. That is for the professionals to take care of it.
I think just the way you have concluded, from that I'm taking my next question to Ashish Trambadia. If you can just put on your video, please, Ashish. Yes, welcome. Hi. Sorry, some technical issues, because of that my videos are not working. Now, my direct question, very specific question, that Ahmedabad World Heritage City Trust, are they, they have some strategy have taken regarding the unlisted properties. Okay, and there are a lot of, because earlier also Debashish sir has mentioned that there are a lot of properties initially was identified, and then slowly it has come down to a specific based on the certain quality and criteria. Now, what about those unlisted properties, and is there any sort of demolition is happening? Because my previous experience of 2 years of stay in Ahmedabad, I have experienced a lot of demolition is going on in the city. So, is there any strategy on behalf of trust is going to adopt in future days, and or some sort of process is going on? So, and in that case, what are the sort of specific grants you have allocated, or any guidelines you have adopted, or you are going to adopt? So, if you can just share your views on that.
Sure, Bikram, thank you for the question. I was actually excited to answer, because then I'll get a chance to speak. I realized almost all the stalwarts that I knew in conservation, all my seniors had spoke after me. I've learned from almost all of them, Kirtida, Debashish, Benny, Kiran sir, and it was excellent also to hear from Sunaina ma'am and Kakoli. The question that you asked is more like legal. So the trust basically is not really a decision-making authority. It's more like a public dealing or public dialogue organization, but we make our recommendations. So in such cases, we make our recommendations to the concerned competent authority. In one of my slides, if you remember, I'd shown the map of Ahmedabad with 28 monuments and its prohibited areas and the regulated areas. Almost 70% ASI has control over it. So illegal demolition, whenever it is done, new construction will not be permitted by default. Second, in 2019, our administration came up with the new general Development Control Regulations, which has got a specific chapter on Ahmedabad walled city. These are the development control regulations for the entire state, but this has got a separate chapter for the core walled city zone of Ahmedabad, which specifically says that for non-listed building, I'm saying listed building has entirely different regulation set. This one is saying your GDCR will be eased out if you're retaining your footprint. So there'll be less taxes, very easy to get permission to repair and restore, and you also get to enjoy the existing built up, because in due course of time most of the buildings are at least 3-storied. G+2 is there. So this is what it is in the regulations. But if you want to propose a new construction, demolish it fully, bring it down to ground zero and build new, it's much more difficult. Taxes are more. The building permission costs, official costs are more. Then there are more taxes after the construction. Less built up is allowed. The FSI for the core walled city zone is reduced. So you cannot build as more as G+2. You have to go down. So this is the kind of regulation that we have introduced in 2019.
So basically, incentives is the one major tool for
non-listed buildings. Bikram, it's very difficult to have incentives because those buildings will be in like 1,070,000 or something like that for the walled city itself, and the buffer area, if you count, it will be more than 1 lakh of building. Incentives are not there, but there are regulations which are interesting. For instance, you cannot have a cellar parking. So you cannot have a building elevated and there'll be parking below. So that the typology of built up does not change. Central courtyard is mandatory, which is in proportion to your plot area. It's not just for sake of it. So
architectural guidelines are there. Yeah.
So these are general building regulations. It does not have facade control. It does not have a stylistic control, but it still enforces you to adhere to what is there in compatible in the walled city context. Now, obviously, as we understand, builder lobby is very powerful, and not all the regulations are possible to implement at one go. So these were introduced in 2019. And we have started implementing it. Furthermore, to understand this lacuna and also to identify places where development can happen also. It's a living city. We cannot freeze the development. We are working for a new heritage conservation plan, which is an exercise which is looking for possible regulatory framework with National Institute of Urban Affairs. So we are hoping to refine it further.
Yes. Thank you, Ashish. I think we got your, key answer, and definitely it would be enriching for us to know actually how walled city and walled heritage city rather is handling this situation, because it is a living city also.
True. One more thing. I would like to say that Debashish can never be out. So as I said, the competent authority, Debashish is also part of our Heritage Conservation Committee. Absolutely. And definitely also informs us when we are wrong. The trust and the junior teams. So Ahmedabad has this legacy.
We have to go and keep hand in hand. Yes, absolutely. We all cooperating each other. Sorry, we are already running out of time. I think I will take 10 more minutes to finish all the questions. I hope I'm permitted. So my next question to Kakoli Banerjee and Sunaina ma'am, regarding if Sunaina ma'am is here, if you can put on. Yeah, thank you ma'am. Sorry, I'm doing really a marathon session. It's really, we don't have any choice. So as we had, seen that there are a lot of funding, because Pondicherry is one example probably where we have seen a lot of successful intervention being made and being planned, and it's a pretty long process. Now, while allocating the funds for specific activities, except the conservation of built heritage, how you have selected such activities, if I ask you that question? What are the sort of criteria? Yeah.
First, I would really like to say that what comes across in all the examples and all the things that we have seen is that you need a Debashish, you need a Benny, you need a Kiran, you need an Ashish, and we need a Jeet who is no more there. And it is these individuals who are ending up driving all the efforts and in a sustained manner, which allows this to happen. To answer your question, I would like to break up the players in this in 4 categories. So first, there's the government departments. So among the government departments, there's the town and country planning, there's the tourism, there is the PWD, of course, and there is the forest and environment. Now, I bring in these because the heritage and whatever we talk about has always been heritage across the board, not just built heritage. So from natural all the way down to built. So how they do their planning and their allocation of funds, they do take advice from INTAC. And this has been one of Pondicherry's great success. I mean, the reason for Pondicherry's success story is that INTAC and the government have been working together on a lot of these issues, and they take decisions in a joint manner. Now, of course, that doesn't include people like us, but hopefully it should include people like the Heritage Conservation Committee, where these kind of decisions and allocation of funds should also maybe go through another body rather than directly the departments themselves, so that a more holistic picture is taken into account. Because what happens not just in states and union territories, but as well as in the center, everything is in silos. You have this ministry, this department, this department. When things go across different departments, no one takes responsibility. You either have to go to the chief minister or you have to go to the PMO, which is ridiculous because another body can come along and can make all the different groups work together. So that's one aspect of it. The second aspect is the experts. For the experts, I think that people like you, I mean, all of you are conservation experts, and there's not enough of this happening in academia. There's not enough of this happening in architecture colleges, and there's not enough of this happening in civil engineering colleges. And how to make that happen, and how, I mean, you know, if I had my way, I would make sure that every civil engineering college teaches how to repair and conserve heritage buildings, because every city of ours has them, be it ancient temples to modern heritage. And this is very, very important, because we are going to lose our great heritage because there is no understanding, be it in PWD engineers, be it in ASI officers, or be it in just normal contractors. There's not enough understanding of how this you know, conservation takes place. And Ashish's point was so good about maintenance. Maintenance of the buildings is even more important. I mean, the famous example of what has happened, or what is happening to the Kalahasti temple, where that beautiful, gorgeous ancient temple, this is something I came to know from Arun Menon, they were plastering it and putting water resistant paint. I mean, that is the first.
Yeah, it's a civil addition, and yeah, this is one definitely a part.
So this is the second thing where I would imagine that allocation should go. The third is the people. It is a people's movement. So in our case, like, it is a people's movement. And I would like to link that with where does the actual funding come from, that where you have to start allocating the funds, where does the funding come from? When it's government funding, we do not have a role in that. When it's private funding, a very interesting example in this is what our governor, Kiran Bedi has done with the Tank Users Association and with a whole group of NGOs and collectives that work on the water bodies. So she has tried to bring in, while we bring in the community into this pot, What she has tried to bring in is companies and corporates who are nearby. Now, unfortunately, it only works with her persuasion. So how to make it into a kind of a partnership where they also feel that they have things to gain, that they come up, and then at the end of the day, the allocation of funds has to be a collective decision that has to be taken by everyone who's going to be affected by the actual work that's going to be carried out with the funds that are coming in. And capacity building, I just want to talk about that. Capacity building has to start from the children, and there's no other way. And it has to be the children, and we are seeing this happen in Pondicherry, whether it's the coloring book, whether it's the, we have the heritage quiz, whether it's expression of heritage through the arts, and every kind of media. Every year there are more and more people who want to be a part of it. And the children, I mean, school children. This time we also introduce college students. And they really look forward to it. And the ideas they come up with, the videos they make. Last time we introduced short clips of films as well. The dance, the singing, the music, everything, expressing heritage through all these different media. So it's the children who have to be taken on board.
Thank you so much sharing this critical insights about your Pondicherry project. And yes, it is very interesting, and we probably we can actually continue on and on, because a lot of things we need to know, and we probably can hold similar sessions from ICOMOS India East or any other zone later in coming days. My next question, sorry, I have two questions and two discussants, Kirtida and Kiran sir. So both of them, the question to Kirtida is, do you think while making heritage strategies, it must be strictly correlated with the economic interest of the people who own the properties instead of the everyday users of the city? So are we going to focus more towards the property owners or the everyday users of the city? And in your particular project, during documentation and delineation of boundaries, that precincts, division, how such aspects has considered, how you have actually decided that, okay, this would be the boundary definition for keeping that different interest groups, or so on and so forth. So if you can please ask, because it is directly connected with the management mechanism, and we probably need to listen from you. But I'm sorry if you have to do it a little faster.
Sure.
Already I'm getting, yes. Thank you.
Sure. So coming back to the first question that you asked, yes, surely these participation and strict initiation into identification of the interests of economic interests of the landowners and the property owners has to be taken care of. But nonetheless, I am not implying that at the initial stage of the listing that was carried out in the case of Mumbai, I suppose it was done for the need of the hour, and it was at that point of time a very speedy expedition of the process. So, but the rest of the processes which followed on from 1997 till date, till 2012, these processes were not included. During this phase of time, I have done only one of the precincts identification, which was the Kambala Hill, which I partly indicated here. And there what we did was to at least identify, because we didn't have much say in the change of the policies which were overlapping. Legally, that was just not possible. And so one had to take care to at least keep the character of the precinct intact. And so we identified these properties which were cessed, as I have been calling them. Cessed are the properties which have been inflicted with the Rent Control Act. And these are the properties which then, since 1991, were taken out of the list actually. And preference was given to them to redevelop. And so these were identified very, very carefully. And we tried to keep its character at least under control by setting up of guidelines. As far as the owners were concerned, in this particular precinct, they were of a richer class. They stayed in properties, either bungalows, and most of them were leased out from the government itself. So all the municipal commissioners, BPT chairman, and all these people who are at the high posts of Mumbai city, who are in the governance themselves. So they are located there. And these properties have been on lease to the BMC. So they are very well protected, and we didn't have to do anything much there. Even today, they are well protected. Mumbai Corporation has now set up a heritage cell, and this heritage cell has their own finances. And so it is within this finances that these properties are looked after. But as far as the other private properties are concerned, they have already consumed their FSI. And because of that, they cannot even avail of the TDR. So TDR, as I was saying, and that was a question I wanted to ask Ashish, as well as to how do you deal with TDR? In the case of Mumbai, we are not able to deal with it simply because the FSI of the heritage buildings which are listed under grade 3, which fall under the CESS category, have already consumed their FSI. And therefore, there is no point in taking a TDR on something that they do not have as an entity already existing with them. It's a quite tricky process. But I would just want to say that basically, each of the cities, each of the contexts are separate. So when we are looking at Ahmedabad, it is a separate game of issues. When it is Mumbai, it's a separate game of issues. When I was looking at Matharan, it is quite different. And when I was looking at one of the precincts in Virar, which was an area action plan, it was a different scenario. And in all these cases, we did try to look into these aspects of how to delineate and how to manage change. And that is the end of the story. We are not able to do much with the economics of a city like Mumbai, for sure. It's a very, very difficult situation as far as the rest of the precincts go. And I emphasize on that point, that because of the 4th precinct having its central core location, because it has maximum number of government buildings which are already in grade 1, they have a funding corpus which has been initiated by MMRSCS, partly by private players and by the government themselves. So they are all safe and healthy. It is only the private buildings, even within the 4th precinct, which have no chance of survival because they fall into that category which has an overarching policy and no chance of TDR. I hope I've answered the question.
No, yep. So it's interesting that every methodical approach has a lot of limitations, but positives also. So it goes hand in hand. And you correctly pointed out that Indian cities and Indian precincts have a heterogeneous character. It is not a homogeneous character and varied complexity. And from that perspective, my last question to Kiran sir, kindly, and hope we are 15 minutes. We have already or maybe more than that. But anyway, from your experience of practice perspective, how do you differentiate the methodical management framework with the on-ground approach, the real ground situation, the way you handle, you negotiate, you have faced in case of Pune? What are the key components do you think that we need to adopt in existing methodical approach, which is already on board, and how do you sort of enhance them? And it is no more about this particular, it is more about an indigenous approach. It is not anymore a borrowed approach. So how do you respond? That what should we do in terms of creating something? Yeah.
Yeah, here I would repeat what this AGK Menon had said, that one must look at our situation properly, what works and what doesn't work. That's very important here because we have been looking at in the beginning, Intact made about 100 projects of documenting and trying to tell people that they should do that or they should do this. And many of the people didn't do that. For example, the Mathura Vrindavan Ghats project that I had worked with K.T. Ravindran, it never materialized, because the whole implementation mechanism, the whole looking at the economics of it, the legislation that is there, the management about it was just not in place. We took a kind of inheritance from the British. And of course, from that education, we're speaking this language today. We went to places where they thought we should look at how they've done things, and that's how we all landed up at York. But after coming back, we realized that we are in a completely different time capsule. We are a completely different economic, management, and legislative kind of situation. And we should find our own means to actually get things implemented. For example, the earlier question that you had asked, Kirtida, about how much the owners were taken into confidence. And we are at the moment dealing with one owner whose heritage listed property has been listed. They want to keep that property very much. They are actually the family who introduced Bhimsen Joshi to India and his singing. And they have been able to get together some 50 lakh rupees. They need 3 crores. And the city establishment told them, sorry, we cannot help you financially, but you have to keep your building as it is. Now, this is draconian legislation. Though we are conservation architects, we understand that it is very important. But if the people who are going to enjoy that heritage do not pay for it, take Kirtida's example. She said that Mumbai is the most financially vibrant city in India. And if that cannot set aside funds for conservation, what are we talking here? The Pune Municipal Corporation passed a legislation in 2017, just 3 years ago, saying that 2% of the development charges that are collected for new developments should be diverted towards conservation. Just about a week ago, I gave them an entire procedure of how to do it from the MMR Heritage Conservation Society document. So, we are at the moment just dealing where we are beginning to realize that all our thoughts and aspirations that came from wonderful reports and fabulous documentation is of no use if we cannot actually convert it into action plans and show some action taken on the sites, the actual places where the heritage action is required. If we cannot show that, it's a very sorry story. So I think we should just pull our socks, see what is possible, see where the sun is rising. Like people say that hum ugte hue suraj ko namaskar karne wale hain. That means that whoever has got the means, who has got the muscle power for it, who has got the legislation or whatever on their side, that is where probably we should be investing our energies. And it'll take some time, before we come to terms with that, before we find an equivalent of IPL in conservation, which actually works, which is popular with the people, and which is also not violative of the values that we hold so dear to us. Have I answered that, Bikramjit?
Yes, I think you have actually triggered the further discussion. Definitely, we need an indigenous system of management and handle our versatile, heterogeneous, very complex nature of heritage precincts. That's what you have, sort of triggered the whole discussion, which is next in future we can continue with. I think here I'm going to thank all of you, and it is really nice to have all of you on board. I'm really sorry we have done very, it's like a hurricane session, but it's good that probably the dialogue starts, its journey begins, and in future we will start negotiating, start discussing all these stories, all these experiences, and start putting together. And by saying that, I will transfer over to Dr. Mitro and Ananyadi. Please take over the stage. Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Bikramjit. We have had a very enriching session. I will now briefly sum up the main points of today's webinar. Some of the important points that came up during the day, during the evening rather, were, how can culture contribute to the economy? How is culture a transformative force for sustainable development? How can heritage conservation go beyond tourism? Tenancy and rent regulations acts, the challenges, the issue of TDR or transfer of development rights, recognition given to old buildings, first-time regulations, support given to locally tested buildings and not to monuments, how professionals should take charge of heritage conservation, how there should be flexibility in planning, as well as very other important points related to the theme today, that was legal tools and financial aspects of heritage conservation. Some of the discussants have also put forth the important point about the role played by the courts, the media, as well as by the new generation, particularly school and college children, and what they can do to conserve heritage. But the common point or the running theme throughout all presentations was perhaps the importance of the people and the local community in preserving heritage. And that connecting thread will help us to connect this webinar series with the next series that we have lined up, which is on community development. But before that, of course, we have another day of very interesting talk and discussion about this theme on October 3. I hope all of you will join us. Now I will hand over to Ms. Ananya Bhattacharya to deliver the vote of thanks.
Yeah, I will not take any more names. We're short of time and overrun, but I sincerely thank all the speakers and the discussants in the panel for your wonderful and holistic insights and overview. And I'll just say that we are going to write to you and call you and continue the dialogue, because we have many questions and we have received many questions which we could not take up today, but this is not the end. And I'll also thank Dr. Sunaina and Bikramjit for, designing the whole thing and doing all the hard work as the session coordinator and the moderator. I thank ICOMOS India and all our ISON members, NSCHTV and Emerging Professionals Working Group for all the support, and especially those who are working behind the scenes, our executive assistants, Sujata, Supreet, Khushi, Nandini, all of you, sincere thanks. And all of you, please join the dialogue on October 3rd again, and we'll continue the discussion. With this, let me end. Thank you. Good night and namaskar.
Thank you. Thank you. Good night. Namaskar.